Good morning. Hey, we're all together. Good morning. That's better. I'm Brenda Stanley, and I am the board chair of the Idaho Children's Trust Fund. And it's my honor to welcome you all here today. I almost get teary seeing people face to face. This has just been such a nice thing. I appreciate technology, love technology, because it allows us to kind of carry on with our lives. But this is so much better. I'm going to introduce our board and our staff of the Idaho Children's Trust Fund, and also try to give you a little sense of where these people live and what areas they represent. In our board, if you could stand or wave so that people can see where you are, I'd appreciate that. We are going to start in Region 1. Region 1 is the Panhandle. There's Richard Jervelin. That is the northernmost part of our state, is what Richard represents. Charlotte Waters is in the Region 2 area, and that is the north central part of our state. Dahlia Stender is Region 3's representative, and that's the southwest part. Robin Allen is with Region 4. I don't know if Robin's here today. I don't believe so. Okay. She is with the central west part of the state. That's kind of the Boise area. Jill Andrus is Region 5, and that is the south central part of Idaho. Region 6 is the region that I represent, and that's the southeastern part of the state, Pocatello Blackfoot area. Tina McBride is our brand new board member. She represents Region 7, which is the East Central, and already has a fan club. And we have 3 representatives for state departments. Jen Haddad is with the Department of Health and Welfare. That's awesome. Yeah. Got to get our sections and start working on this. All right. The Department of Education is represented by Shannon Dunstan. And Cheryl George is with the Office of the Attorney General. I don't think she's here. She should be here later. All right. So can I get another Region 6? Oh, okay. All right. I was trying. Yeah, thank you. Our staff who has put this conference together and has done such an amazing job. Shelly Andrus is our brand new community resource coordinator in the eastern part of the state. Where's Shelly? She's out working, obviously. Okay. Kim Hemmert is our grants manager and planner. Tabor Martin is our administrative assistant. She's over there. And of course, our executive director is Roger Sherman. Thank you again, everybody, for being here. Please make sure that you give us your feedback. Tell us what we did right, what we need to work on. We have those forms available after all the workshops. I truly believe you are going to have an absolutely wonderful learning experience here today. And again, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Again, man, it is so good to see you all. I'm like, I don't know, I think I'm gonna have a hard time not crying just to see everybody in one space. It's been a time, hasn't it, for all of us? It's a wonder we are still standing. So I suggest that we all give each other some applause. Look at each other, applaud yourself. I got a tip the other day, in case there's somebody who you think you might know, but you just saw them on Zoom, you just put a little box over their face like this, and then, you'll know that that's the person you had seen before. It might help. So as we gather together, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which our homes exist is the ancestral land of the Shoshone, Bannock, Nez Perce, Kootenai, Coeur d'Alene, and Paiute tribes who inhabited a vast region, including much of Idaho. And we acknowledge the ancient tribes whose names have been lost in history. We offer this acknowledgement as a recognition of the longer history of the land that we occupy and the generations of children who grew up on it. We offer it as an uncomfortable truth. May this truth discomfort us as we work towards healing. So let me begin with just a few logistical details. Hopefully you found the bathroom and the food. That's a good starting point. But I want to tell you about some things that are coming up. So tonight at 6:30, so we get done here at 4:30, and we'd like to really encourage people to join us for what we're calling a town hall on prevention, to have some conversation about ways in which, with us having not all been together for a couple of years, it's really a good opportunity for us to sit down and just talk to each other and hash some things out, see what it is that, people are feeling out in their communities or seeing out in their communities that you think we ought to be, addressing. And so there's opportunities out there. So hopefully, people will join us this evening at 6:30. I know some of you are from out of town, and Boise becomes the lights. The lights are an attraction, but if you can make it, we'll be done at 8 o'clock. Still early. There are some flyers out on the table. That is the Idaho Children's Trust Fund's table, which is out just over to the, to the right of the registration desk. And we have some materials about a listening project that's going on. This is another opportunity. We're trying to reach out to parents around the state to give them, to find out what people are thinking about. Again, a listening project to get a sense of what their voice is. So there's some flyers about how to help us find people. At lunch today, there is a group called called Speak Your Silence, which works on prevention, or works on actually intervention around child sexual abuse and adult abuse as well. They provide funding for counseling and so on. They have a very cool Volkswagen bus, which they've fixed up, and it has some of their merch and stuff in it. So check it out during lunchtime. It's gonna be out in the parking lot. Another out in the parking lot thing is, as you might have seen, our awardee for the Ed Van Dusen this year is the Bikers Against Bullies, which is out of Idaho Falls, or at least it's the Idaho Falls chapter of that group. And that group is gonna have some motorcycles here. So I think that's gonna happen on Wednesday. So you can check that out. There are display tables out in the foyer if you haven't found those. So a lot of different things, a lot of different resources and so on, people to talk to. So do that too. And then if people need pinwheels, signs, lapel pins, anything, Child Abuse Prevention Month is right upon us. And so if there's anything that you need that you haven't gotten, please talk to Tabor, or talk to me, or talk to somebody, somebody up at the registration desk, and we can help you out. So I think that's my announcements. So then I just want to say a few words. So we called this conference Planting the Seeds of an Idea, to reflect our sense that as we move into this next phase of our lives and work, it's time for all of us to open ourselves up to some new ideas, about how we move forward to really, address the issues that families and kids, are dealing with. So I hope during this next couple of days, you'll pick up a new idea from a talk, from a workshop, or from a new colleague at lunch. One big idea that we've been thinking a lot about during the last couple of years is the idea of creating a child and family well-being system that recognizes the importance of prevention and works to support families early in their parenting journeys so that all kids can grow and thrive, and so that abuse and neglect never occur in the first place. Creating the conditions where all kids can grow and thrive is the goal of the Idaho Children's Trust Fund, which is also the state affiliate of Prevent Child Abuse America. All of us together, you all, are planting little seeds of hope that through our nurture and care will grow and flourish within the families and communities we serve. As always, thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Those pots on the tables, there's all these seed packets. We want people to take them with them, plant them, and think about this, think about the children in your lives, think about this community. But if all of us have those flowers out there, we all remain connected. Where am I? So this idea of a family and child well-being system is, what they call one of those big, hairy, audacious ideas, has lots of moving parts. All of you are part of it. We're going to see if we can put it together here using this poster that's up here. And there's some Post-it notes. And what we'd like people to do during the course of the conference is to write on that where you fit into this community concept of how we connect to one another across this big state of ours in our own communities. I don't know if I'll leave it here or we'll put it out there. We'll figure out some place to put it, but so that you can come in and put your Post-it notes on it. Just, put what piece of this you have. If you're a home visitor, if you're a Head Start teacher, if you run a domestic violence shelter, if you're work for health and welfare, if all of those things, any of those things, we all have a piece of this. So hopefully we can, get a visual of what that's going to look like for all of us. What are you doing to contribute to family and child well-being? Because you have a piece of it. Where can people receive support where there's less stigma involved? How can we change the norm around asking for help? If you've been around me at all, I'm always asking, how do we make parenting classes cool? And how can we best give parents the support they need so that some of these things, don't happen in the first place. And that's really our goal, is to get to the place where, abuse and neglect don't occur in the first place. So I'm going to share a little story with you. Hopefully I can make this happen on the screen. It's a little story from, well, we'll put it up there. They actually tell you, so I'll just do it that way. Do you know this story?
What do you do with an idea? One day I had an idea. Where did it come from? Why is it here? I wondered, what do you do with an idea? At first, I didn't think much of it. It seemed kind of strange and fragile. I didn't know what to do with it, so I just walked away from it. I acted like it didn't belong to me. But it followed me. I worried what others would think. What would people say about my idea? I kept it to myself. I hid it away and didn't talk about it. I tried to act like everything was the same as it was before my idea had showed up. But there was something magical about my idea. I had to admit, I felt better and happier when it was around. It wanted food, it wanted to play. Actually, it wanted a lot of attention. It grew bigger and we became friends. I showed it to other people, even though I was afraid of what they would say. I was afraid that if people saw it, they would laugh at it. I was afraid they would think it was silly, and many of them did. They said it was no good. They said it was too weird. They said it was a waste of time and that it would never become anything. And at first, I believed them. I actually thought about giving up on my idea. I almost listened to them. But then I realized, what do they really know? This is my idea, I thought. No one knows it like I do, and it's okay if it's different and weird and maybe a little crazy. I decided to protect it, to care for it. I fed it good food, I worked with it, I played with it, but most of all, I gave it my attention. My idea grew, and so did my love for it. I built it a new house, one with an open roof where I could look up at the stars, a place where it could be safe to dream. I liked being with my idea. It made me feel more alive, like I could do anything. It encouraged me to think big, and then to think bigger. It shared its secrets with me. It showed me how to walk on my hands. Because, it said, it is good to have the ability to see things differently. I couldn't imagine my life without it. Then, one day, something amazing happened. My idea changed right before my very eyes. It spread its wings, took flight, and burst into the sky. I don't know how to describe it, but it went from being here to being everywhere. It wasn't just a part of me anymore. It was now a part of everything. And then I realized what you do with an idea. You change the world.
Yeah, clapping's okay. So that's it, right? So go out and change the world. We have, in these couple of days, hopefully you'll get some new ideas, some new inspiration.
It's Miss Murphy. Gonna read a book to you.
Oh, whoops.
Let's get started.
I thought I turned it off. Let me read a book to you. Hey, where is it?
Okay, so this is a book that I got from one of the local
Sorry.
bookstores. It's called Maybe, and it's written by.
Sorry. Oops. I was wondering who that person was coming into it. Hey, don't be heckling me around here. So anyway, I hope you'll come out of these couple of days with some new ideas, some new inspiration, some ways of thinking about things in a different way, some new perspectives, and that so that we can make the lives of all the families and kids from Sandpoint to Salmon, and everywhere in between, and north of there and south of there and east of there, whatever all that is. But I like that big fish hook. So anyway, we are extremely fortunate to have with us someone who has been the generator of some big ideas around family well-being. Dr. Christina Bethell is a professor with the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. Through her work in promoting the science of thriving, she wants me to make sure that I tell you that she's really a West Coaster, so she's just a refugee over there. Through her work in promoting the science of thriving, she's been a leader in the effort to understand the idea of flourishing and of the healthy outcomes from positive experiences framework. She's helped us understand that it's not enough to know about ACEs and childhood trauma. Those are only diagnoses. That while they importantly help us to understand what has happened to a person, they don't tell us what to do about it. Dr. Bethell's work is helping us know what to do about it. Like the pinwheel that we use to symbolize the happy and healthy childhood we want for all children, Dr. Bethell's work aspires to provide a pathway for us to follow for creating thriving families. The program has a much more extensive biography for you to see all the areas Christina's been involved with, which are super extensive. So we're very lucky to have her. So please welcome Dr. Christina Bethell to Idaho.
For that thoughtful introduction and also amazing opening conversation. I feel similar to Roger about being here today, but I also feel very humbled that you're going to be listening to me or working with me, hopefully interacting with me for the next really 3 hours. So my goal today is to really support your work and support your goals. And so I'd like to invite you to be actively listening to what I share, but also if something arises as I do, and you really want to bring it into the space, to just raise your hand. I'll do my best to see you. First of all, if I can see you, or someone can call it out, but we will have an hour and a half in the afternoon or the later morning to really interact. And that's going to be much more you talking with each other and us talking together. So let me see where I can go here with my keynote. Let me open it up and get it going. Okay, so yeah, we are, like it or not, I think we are taking the leap to create relational systems of care. And that requires us to look at the ecosystem that we have from policy, practice, as well as within us and between us. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that today. And just so you know, the Child and Adolescent Health Measurement Initiative has been around since 1996, when indeed the big idea of engaging families and creating whole person and whole family well-being was laughed at, literally, at meetings. The words family-driven quality measurement and improvement, or whole person care, profiles of performance that look at the whole person was not something that we talked about. So I've definitely been through the journey of my little big idea, as have many of you, because I'm sure many of you have been through the same journey the last 30 years. And our work looks at data in action. When I started my work, there were no measures, there was no data, so we couldn't really have the conversation. So I very reluctantly got into how do you measure things? How do you validate those measures? And then how do you get the data collected so that we have some information to be able to find out how we're doing and what's related to what? And can we find out if our policies and practices are making a difference clinically, locally, as well as at the state and federal level? But the whole goal was really to promote flourishing all along. And so that's been an enduring idea, like Roger said. So I'm looking forward to learning from you as well in this ongoing journey. So I don't have any financial relationships to disclose, which I think is important for you to know, but I do want to disclose that I do actually believe that well-being is upon us. And that is maybe a radical statement given the state of the world, but I think when things that have been hidden come out, we have a chance to maybe heal them. And there certainly is a lot of pain going on in the world, but it also, just like when you're healing from trauma, the first step is to be aware, I'm suffering, there's something wrong, and then holding the space and doing the work of healing. So we heal because we have pain. And to recognize the pain is really part of the journey of flourishing, so that we flourish as a living and relating quality, not as I'm happy all the time or I feel good all the time, but I stay related to what's happening toward healing, which is possible and what we're built for. So it's within and between us largely. Even we have these fancy policies that we talk about. If you wind it down, ideas don't transform themselves, people do. And so who we are and how we are with each other moment by moment is absolutely critical to the success of implementing any good idea. So any good idea has been implemented by people who choose to come together and bring that to life. So I call it We Are the Medicine, because I think more and more the good news is that a lot of what we can do now. We don't need necessarily a lot of policy changes. There's a lot it's how we're doing what we're doing and accessing the qualities and abilities we have already within us that can help to start transform and bring to life many of the policies and programs and innovations for really helping children and families thrive. So that's good news for me, because I certainly don't want to wait around for bigger changes that might lead to more funding and things like that. We have to keep that work going. But in the meantime, to really optimize our capacities right now, which are tremendous. So we have about 70 years of research. I put this little slide and the next one together to kind of map out, when did we start having the conversation in society that relational health and parent-child connection really, really predicted lifelong well-being? And it was really the Harvard Mastery of Stress study in 1951 that was published. And they took young freshmen, it was all men at the time, and just asked them a few questions about their experience with their childhood and whether they felt close and connected and cared about and especially supported during difficult times. I think of it as the big precursor to the ACEs study. And those that rated both parents low in terms of experiencing love, which is something we know what that means, it's an embodied experience, and caring, 87% by 1993 had been diagnosed with some form of illness, and it was about 25% for everyone else. So this was the very first study just based on the embodied experience that was reported. And so this is very important that we can diagnose illness and we can diagnose this, that, and the other, but it's really the experience that we actually had that's been rolling around and knocking around in our nervous system and in our identities all this time. So it's important that we recognize that continues. And it just went on from there. And I also include in here a lot of the work around mind-body approaches. Because as the neuroscience developed, we really came to understand that our own minds can help heal our brains. So if our brains are impacted by adversity and stress, we have a mind that can actually be intentionally relating to that which in us, which is dysregulated, as a way to help regulate ourselves. But it requires that kind of consciousness and intention. And that is not radical now, but it certainly was for a long time. You can call it whatever you want. Interoception is the formal term. Some people use mindfulness, some people use prayer, but it's basically turning your intention and attention toward yourself in a way that can help the part of you that somehow magically understands what's possible to help regulate the part of you that might not, so that we can actually show up whole and present and aware and also heal. And so all the healing modalities involve some form of connecting in this way with ourselves and then with each other, collective co-regulation. So anyway, I will share this with you if you want, but it just went on. And now we're at a place where I call it the positive and relational health policy breakthrough. And all along, I think we understood that the presence of adversity isn't the same as the presence of well-being, because there's plenty of people who actually don't have adversity who are not well, but we didn't really look at it. So there's a lot of work that's gone on. I just want to recognize and say that we also will take the next 70 years. Some of us will be here, some of us will not be here in 70 years, but we owe it to ourselves and to future generations to continue to lay the groundwork and continue the trajectory toward healing, because we in fact have made huge progress, even though we're suffering today in many ways. So most of you know about the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. Does anyone in here not know about it? I'm sorry, that was actually not a good question. How many people have heard about it? That's a better way to go. Okay, so, my colleague Jane Stevens calls it the largest public health study you never heard of, which is really just a study by CDC that looked at experiences that can occur in childhood that are adverse, mostly through the pathway of inhibiting or reducing the sense of safety and nurturance in a child. And so these are baseline needs we have to be able to grow healthy and develop healthy. So we know about that. And a recent study in JAMA reaffirmed what we've known over and over, that in fact, these experiences, especially the cumulative experiences, impact almost every physical health problem that we know of. For example, emotional neglect is very connected to higher probability of heart disease, and so on and so forth. So we have a systematic review because there's been enough research. So we know that. And we also know that what I call equally unequal. So, the body and the biological systems, are similar across every economic and social strata, right? So even though, because of the stressors in life, our ACEs are more prevalent for lower income and more oppressed or marginalized communities, especially communities of color, when they do occur, it's a very similar impact. So this slide is really showing that for children who are living in higher income homes with 4 or more ACEs, the probability that they experience a mental, emotional, behavioral problem is about 45%, compared to 53% for children in poverty. And that is actually not the kind of difference that you might expect there would be. So there's a lot of need to say, this is all of us, no matter where we are, and we change in our life where we are. And so we really have to make this a public health issue. We can definitely see the impact of ACEs on engagement in school, which we all can agree we care about, right? And child engagement in school, being curious in learning, being able to persist in a task, being able to regulate frustration, at least enough to a level where you can stay in the game to learn and relate and grow. And what we find is that with just 2 or more ACEs, we see dramatic drops in children's engagement in school, down to 33.4%. It's about double with no ACEs. And then also having a chronic condition or special healthcare need. And the pathways, the biological pathways that might relate to that are actually very well understood. And it's 13% having a special healthcare need with no ACEs and 35% with 2 or more. And this is obviously, a long conversation we could have about it, but all to say that we know it's a big deal. And interesting as this is, it doesn't tell us how children really are faring, even though they have these adversities. So we're going to talk about that next. But I do want to point out first that it's 57% of children with no ACEs who are engaged in school. That means 40% still are not. So what's making up the fact that even in maybe the best of circumstances, and this research did adjust for everything and so on, that we still are really limited in our level of engagement in life and flourishing for children. So we have a ways to go even in the best of circumstances. So I think that's important to recognize. Okay, so I am going to now transition to discuss that this concept of a dual continuum of health. So even though we know we have these issues and what predicts illness and what predicts problems and ACEs and all that, it doesn't actually tell us how well people are doing. I just said that. So the World Health Organization has defined health broadly to be not just the absence of illness, but the presence of health. And we don't really talk about that a lot. We still put most of our energy around looking for problems and trying to see how to get rid of them. But the absence of illness or adversity is not the same as well-being or flourishing. And I'm going to show you some data in a minute and have you reflect on yourself as well. But the presence of illness does not mean the absence of flourishing. Many, many people in the world and in your life even have illnesses, have adversities, but they're meeting criteria for flourishing. So let's talk about what we think that means. So I'm going to talk about a positive construct of health and having that really be a new public health focus. The science of flourishing, and then how to translate this. Let's see how far I can get. I think I have till 10:30. Is that right? Okay, great. I thought I had an hour and a half, so I have a little, but I might have to go quickly through some things. Okay. So first of all, studies have been done to look at flourishing in adults, and I'm going to definitely define it for you in just a second and give you a chance to assess your own flourishing. So we know that if these qualities of flourishing, which we can learn, and which I believe are relationally learned and relationally dependent. We can't really flourish without positive relationships and supportive relationships. That the all-cause mortality was dramatically increased. So death increased by as much as 62% for adults over a 10-year period, similar to the Harvard Mastery of Stress study, when they lacked these qualities of flourishing. And the effect of this was consistent regardless of the kinds of conditions they had. So there could be very, very serious illness. That effect was consistent even for people who were very, very, very ill. So flourishing was really a science. It's not something you're born with, although you're born with the capacity. It will evolve naturally under positive conditions. But having a sense of meaning and purpose, that's the first thing that we think of as flourishing. So do we have a sense of meaning and purpose? And in adversity, can you actually have a sense of meaning and purpose? Many people actually grow in their sense of meaning and purpose under adversity, and they get very focused on possibilities, which is a positive thing. Not that we want to wait for adversity to bring out positive attributes, but maybe it works that way. Maybe they work together so intimately that we're never really going to ever have a world or a life that doesn't involve both, and that they dance with each other. So this sense of meaning and purpose is important, and it has a lot to do with our early life sense of value, mattering, connection. And so I don't know if you've heard of biobehavioral synchrony, but the American Academy of Pediatrics' new statement on toxic stress, which is shifting from toxic stress as the problem to relational health as the solution, based on some of the research that's been done since they last published the policy statement, really talk about biobehavioral synchrony, that we are actually regulating each other. If you hooked us up, and I said this last night when we were meeting with some people here, that we regulate each other. We don't have the choice to just hang back and not make an impact. We are having an impact every single moment. The question is, are we aware of our presence and how it's impacting people? And you can actually feel it in your body. If you're with somebody that's not engaging, it impacts you, right? If you're somehow not engaged, you impact other people. And that's not to say you're going to change. It's just to be aware that we need each other, and we are like an organic system that's constantly regulating each other and influencing others. So every interaction creates a reaction, which I think was coined by the Wisconsin First Lady. And it's true, and it's biologically true. So we are constantly regulating each other through a biobehavioral synchrony or lack thereof. This relates a lot to our sense of mattering. Do I matter just because? Not because I help people or change the world all the time, but do I matter as a person? And when we don't experience our own sense of mattering, which we need each other to help spark, we need each other to spark our sense of mattering. A lot of difficulties ensue. And in fact, some people are doing research showing that ACEs have their impact on mental health through the portal of whether people have come to a conclusion about whether they matter or not, and their own sense of identity and self-worth. And so it's important to be aware of that and to realize that that's a big portal through which the ACEs have the impact, is whether people end up feeling that they matter or not and are valued just because they exist. There's a lot of other science. This is just a smattering here, but all to say that it is a science. So it's actually called sautulogenesis, is a science of looking at what promotes positive health. And we don't talk about it a lot, but it's the study of what is it that creates positive health. And we know a lot about that, but we don't bring it forward. And one of the big things for adults, which we all are here, is a sense of coherence, which is something that's thought to develop naturally when we actually are in a positive set of relationships, that we can develop this naturally. And it has to do with being able to stay in an empowered state of meaning and purpose when things arise that are hard. So being able to make sense of our lives in a way that keeps us engaged, that keeps us in a trajectory of healing, in a trajectory of discovery, in a trajectory of relatedness. Self-regulation, again, recognizing that shutting down, numbing is a sign of being dysregulated, and acting out and really not being able to be present in other ways also is. It's this place that we can stay with all the emotions that we naturally have, because we need to feel our feelings or we really disconnect, but being able to stay regulated in our own emotions and behaviors, just like we talk about children. And then also, again, maintaining a sense of meaningfulness and mindfulness and presence. So we can talk about this more, but the way it's measured in studies, it's about is associated with 30% reduced all-cause mortality for adults, similar to that first study. So this is important to us, and I hope all of you are interested in your own well-being and flourishing. So when we measure flourishing out there in the world, and for example, the Gallup poll does a well-being measure. One of the measures is what I call the flourishing of the remembering self. So up till now in your life, how satisfied are you with your life? So that's recalling your life up till now. The flourishing of the experiencing self, like right now, do you feel positive emotions? How are you feeling right now? The flourishing of the requiring self. Do you have your needs met? Do you have what you need in terms of food and social support and housing and those sorts of things? And then there's what we're really talking about more and how we measure it in the studies that I'm going to be showing you, which is the flourishing of the living and relating self. So how we maintain a sense of meaning, purpose, engagement, connectedness to others, a sense of mattering and contribution, even as things are difficult. How can we actually cultivate that? And is the difficulty actually part of how we cultivate that is a question. So it's really a quality of the living and relating self that, our emotions positive may come and go. Our sense of satisfaction with our life may be variable as well. But this is a more enduring capacity, like that sense of coherence that I just discussed. Okay. So how is your flourishing connected to helping you foster flourishing among children and families? We're going to talk about this now, and then also in the breakout, do a little bit more conversation with each other. But there are measures that have been validated to look at flourishing, and it has to do with the qualities I've been discussing. So I'm going to give you a chance to think about your own sense of meaning and purpose, your engagement in life, having and seeking positive relationships. I say seeking because sometimes we can't control that. Sometimes we don't have the fortune of having it, but do you still seek it out? Do you still try? You keep going to have relationships. You don't collapse into a state of unrelatedness. Orienting to the positive, actually on purpose, looking for what's good, even in the midst of what might be hard. It can be small things, and it usually is small things, because most of life's wonders and things we're grateful for, if you ask yourself, are small. They're things like the day, another person's smile, something, a warm cup of tea. We have so many things that we actually do really like. And if we can keep the flow of the positive energy going, not as a way to cut out what's difficult, but as a way to enrich ourselves and nourish ourselves. It's a very important thing because our nervous systems and our beings need to feel hope. We need to feel a sense of life is good, can be good. And so if we miss these opportunities to look for the positive and actually experience it, take it all the way in, we get very depleted. And then we end up not being well as we might be. A sense of contribution to others. Probably most people in this room feel that because you're actively working in the area of family and child well-being. So it'd be probably unlikely that you don't feel like you don't contribute to others, I'm sure, but you never know. You may feel frustrated. You may feel like, even though I try, I don't feel like I'm really making a difference. And that's important to be at the watch of. They call that moral injury, where you're trying to make a difference and you don't feel like you are, and what that does to a person, what that does to people and providers in the community right now who are caring for people with COVID who are dying. They have a sense of helplessness. So how do we keep our sense of contribution going even when things are hard? And then also that sense of mattering I talked about. Okay, so there is, I don't know if you have a phone, but if you do, you're meant to go to this mentimeter.com and type in that code, and there'll be a poll for you to complete. And these are the 6 flourishing qualities that I'm just going to ask you to reflect on and to just note how many of those you experience today. Just today. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to get the number to come up. So Roger and I agreed that we would have a problem-solving moment together through this, that we would just have a moment. So it's 1157-9682. 1157-9682. So they don't go to mentimeter.com?
Yeah, they do. It seems,
Okay,
I've heard from some people
it's
that
working.
have gotten it.
Okay, great. Is it working for anybody? Raise your hand. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so I should be able to,
You'll want to go.
let me just actually escape.
Oh yeah, so click here. And then
I was just in it.
hopefully.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
Okay,
There
so
we
there you are. Look at you all. Okay, it looks a little funny because it's more than 100%. It's obviously not, it's just counting people. It's not counting percentages. So yes,
I can.
all right.
See if I can.
It's 1157-9682. So okay. All right, well, let's see where we are at. This was our big grand experiment. So this is actually not calculating percentages. So anybody who's a whiz with math can help me calculate this. But as you'll see, it's a fair equal distribution across 2 to 3, 4 to 5, and all 6. So there's a lot of variation in people in this room on how you're feeling in terms of your own flourishing. And people can just keep responding to this. But so far there's around 200 people who've responded, which is a pretty good figure. So it's very, very distributed. And so the question is, what's that about? Is it just a fluke? Is it just something that, happens, or are there things that we can do to help support our own sense of flourishing? And does that matter to how we can help promote the thriving and well-being of the children and families we serve? And just put that as a question, because we'll actually get a chance to really think about that a lot more during the workshop. So thank you for this and for also working together to achieve this poll. But again, it's a distribution. I don't have the percentages, but it's somewhere like, 32% all 6 and 36% 4 to 5. And again, 33% 2 to 3, and then the rest 0 to 1. Okay. So I think that's hopefully something that is useful for us as a group to see even ourselves. And so part of what's happening here is we're getting feedback. So it's just like what I said before about having an intentional practice of self-reflection. And as you know, self-reflection is the very first, I don't know how many of you have been trained in maternal and child health leadership competencies, but probably several of you have. The first thing is self-reflection. Any sort of process of leadership development, that's what we talk about, but we kind of zoom by it. We say, well, everyone's self-reflective, but it's actually a skill and it's an on-purpose thing. So when you take the time to reflect, then you can get the feedback, and as a group to see yourselves and recognize that how you're doing right here, if we were to get together and try to problem solve a community action, would be very impacted by how you're doing in your own flourishing, your own sense of belief and hope in life, meaning and purpose, skills in relating, a sense that you matter and have something to contribute would certainly impact your engagement or even belief in a process at a community level or an organizational level that you could actually change for the better. So that's really the main point for that, is that we need ways to be able to reflect. Okay. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a odyssey trip through some data and research just to support what I'm talking about, and also to bring some more things to light, talking about some of the nuances of the research and some of the paradoxes it presents. I'm going to move this a little bit because I keep leaning over. All right, let me see if that works. Okay, so the flourishing paradigm is what I'm talking about today. It's a relational, the flourishing paradigm is a relational paradigm. And shining a light on it is important for all children and families and the people who serve them. This is a slide that shows the prevalence of flourishing in the way that we're able to measure it on the National Survey of Children's Health, which is actually just 3 items, but started with 135. Like every measure I've ever created started out with everything you could do, and then through magical statistical analyses, you pick the things that really are sending the biggest signal. So what we have is about 40% of US children, regardless of their income, race, ethnicity, or other social factors, are exhibiting these 3 qualities of flourishing, which is being curious and interested in learning new things, being able to stay calm and in control when faced with daily challenges, and being able to stay persistent and determined in completing tasks that they begin versus giving up easily. Those are really core qualities for learning and for having relationships. And we have about 40% in a survey that is reported by families and parents that report on a positive angle. If there's any bias in the National Survey of Children's Health, it's a positivity bias, where parents usually report things are going well, not the other way. And so that's very sobering, but possibly inspiring as well, because there's something we can do about this. And again, a lot of what we can do about it is within and between us. So what we have for Idaho is all 3 is about 34.2%, 2 is about 29.3, and 0 to 1 is 36.5. The difference between public and privately insured, again, just like I showed you before, doesn't vary as much as you would think. So it's an all of us thing. So if we're trying to engage the whole community and businesses and others, we can say, if we make as our metric flourishing for children, this is all of us. This is not something that you automatically have just because you have more advantage. And if you dig into the data, you will find groups that are the most disadvantaged having the highest flourishing because of how they are in relationship to that. And it's not a fair way to become radically resilient, but there's a lot of communities that are radically resilient because of the disadvantage that they have. And they learn to be very connected and find ways to celebrate their culture and their lives. And so it's really, really an interesting, different way to view how we hold ourselves up in terms of what we're trying to achieve in public health and in our services. So this is the first slide. Again, it affects school engagement. And I think that we keep coming back to that because that's an economic argument you can make to your policymakers. If we're not engaged in school, if you don't have inherent value for every human life on the face of it, but you do value them as economic agents of your society, which some people are like that, you can argue again that this is critical. This is absolutely critical to creating a culture, to creating an Idaho that thrives in the future, right? And also when you look again at household income, it's equally unequal. So here we have children with 2 or more ACEs. The yellow line is children who are in poverty, and the blue line is children who are 400% or more above the poverty level. And they have equal levels of flourishing when they have 2 or more ACEs. And so this again speaks to the fact that ACEs in fact do impact, even though the prevalence of ACEs is higher in more disadvantaged populations, once you experience it, the effect on your well-being, your mental health, your flourishing, your engagement in school is actually very similar. And in this case is not statistically different at all. So having said that, we have a mental health crisis, right? Would you say we have a mental health crisis among children and families in our society today? A lot of what we're talking about in flourishing are qualities of strong mental health. How do we stay connected and engaged in the presence of what we face? And when we go disconnected and we think we're all alone, that is a sure pathway to lack of flourishing. So if we wind it down and say, why do we have a mental health crisis? And why is that happening? And why is that happening? And why is that happening? We end back up at needing to create relational systems of care. We just finished a study that was published in January of this year. Now, this graph is probably not something you're really going to be happy about looking at, and it's very far away, but I'm going to point out a few things. So if children do not, we looked at social risks like economic hardship, problems with food insecurity, neighborhood violence exposure, and experiences of racism and discrimination, which is huge. Because when you live in a society and you walk around and see that you don't matter to other people, the hit is constant and it has a constant impact on your body and in your biology and in your identity. And there's only so much you can do to battle that. So it does show up in our data, any kind of oppression or discrimination and the impact that has. So 15.3% of children in the country have a mental, emotional, behavioral problems is national data. If they do not experience those social risks and they do not experience relational health risks, which we marked as a pretty high bar of 2 or more ACEs, mothers, fathers, or caregivers who have poor or fair mental health, which is actually, really bad, and who report in a positive survey where they would normally report positive that they are often aggravated with their child, feel like they don't like their child. So very parental aggravation, extreme parental stress. So this is a very high bar. And what we have is, first of all, about 61% of children in Idaho have 1 or more of these, either a mental health problem, a social or relational risk. So we know it's very widespread. But if you don't have these, it's 15.3%. If you have 2 or more of those relational health risks, automatically just that, no social health risks, the mental, emotional, behavioral prevalence goes up to 45%. And so it's almost 3 times, right? And if you have both 2 social health risks and 2 relational health risks, it's 61% have a mental, emotional, or behavioral problem. So the truth is 2/3 of all the children that we see who have any mental, emotional, or behavioral problems, which is a high proportion depending on where you're serving kids. If you're working with foster children or any other population that's in high need, they're going to have a high prevalence. That, of course, this is what's underneath it. This is very associated with it. And if we ignore that and don't find out about that, then we're not really having the information that we need. So it's important to know that over 2/3 who have mental emotional behavioral problems have social or relational risk, but 60% of those with just relational risk don't have, 60% of those with relational risk do not have social risk. So if we only focus on the social factors like income and food insecurity and those things, which are so critical, but we ignore the relational health factors because if you don't have social risk, then you're okay. We miss a huge proportion of what's making up the prevalence of mental emotional behavioral problems. It gets back to that this is all of us and that it's important to look at them differently, to not just mush up if you're going to do a social determinants of health assessment, mush everything together, because they're actually distinct, and they are distinct in some ways. If you have social risk but strong relational health, which happens a lot, and I can give you the proportions in Idaho, we have a whole website, you can go find your state data. Those children look very different. So I'm just going to swim through this a little bit, but let you know that that's there for you. So what happens to children who have social and relational risks, either alone or in combination, in terms of school engagement is pretty dramatic. So you can see this slide that's basically showing that the self-regulation of a child is very related to their engagement in school. We talked about that early. That's one of the qualities of flourishing. And when children have that, about 80%, even when they have neither social or relational risks, are engaged in school. For the same children that don't have the risk that we often are looking at, only 26% are engaged in school without that quality of self-regulation, which I reported to you earlier is actually not present for the majority of children in our state right now, basic qualities of that. So we have a huge opportunity to promote self-regulation in children. And I think most of you are probably engaged in that, but how that happens has a lot to do with how we're helping children regulate themselves, has to do with how we relate to them and how we teach them to relate to themselves. So again, it comes back to that, very intimate kind of process of connection with self, being able to notice I'm having feelings, how do I take a breath, and all of those sorts of things. And the thing that helps regulate the most is parent-child connection. And I would say teacher-child connection. There's a lot of research showing the same results are showing up for teacher-child connection as parent-child connection. So you can't stay out of the equation as a person. So you're central to the equation if you're working with children and families. How you are is directly affecting their ability to regulate and then learn. And so again, it puts us all in this together in a very, very strong way. So this is just, again, looking at those who have neither social or relational risks, your best case scenario, having about 55.7 having self-regulation. If they have very good parent-child connection, and only 25% without it. So it's really the same message, getting back to the need to really be aware of this biobehavioral synchrony that's going on all the time, how when it's not present, we don't feel safe, we can't be regulated, and the need for us to look at our own capacity. So I'm going to just go through a few of the nuances of some of this research to just bring it back up. And I'm also going to talk a little bit more about our measures of positive childhood experiences. So how many people are with me? Are you with me? Okay, good. Stay with me. Okay. All right. So the first thing I want to say is that this is the good news that first of all, it's no one thing that can promote flourishing among children amid adversity, because so many experience it. And keep in mind that even though children with high ACEs are more likely to have mental, emotional, behavioral problems or another illness, most do not. I know that's a radical thing to say, but it's a relative risk is high. You're more likely, if you have, as an adult, have ACEs in your childhood to have problems, but most people don't. Not most people with 4 or more ACEs do not have heart disease, are not addicted, do not have depression. The probability is way higher, but something's going on because there's a lot of people who are making it through in a better way. And so what is that? And that's part of what we're unbundling here. But so it's no one thing. The effects are related to cumulative. It's really the cumulative consistency of inputs that are positive and caring that can come from a lot of different places. Ideally, they do come from the home and the family, but sometimes parents really are suffering themselves And what happens in the school really matters. And what happens in the everywhere, through any door, the bus driver, the grocery clerk, everybody matters so much. If you think about your own life, times when you had a hard day and how you were met by just some random stranger impacted you, it changes your biology. It changes your mindset. It changes your belief about yourself and the possibilities of your life. So again, getting back to how important every single person is. So this is just a graph that's showing that we can look at individual things, like parent-child connection and all these things, and they do have, I don't know if you can see this or not. I didn't realize that we wouldn't have more of an up close piece, but I'll do my best. But it's really the cumulative. So it's the accumulation that's important, and it's no one thing. The other is that connection is more powerful than positive parenting behaviors. So yes, it's important to share meals and have good bedtime routines and limit TV watching and meet all of your children's friends and all of these things that we know are important to good parenting. But parent-child connection and family resilience trump that over and over. So we separate them. Protective family routines and habits is one thing. Family resilience and parent-child connection is another. And so it's really the family resilience in this study that we looked at, and I'll tell you the results in a minute, of do you talk with each other? Do you acknowledge that there's a problem, that we're having a hard time, instead of pretending it's not there? Do you work together? Can children see that we have something going on and we're going to actually work to get support? We're going to work together on it and we're going to try our best, and also stay hopeful and to see that you have strengths to draw on. So those are the 4 things that are in the family resilience bin. About 48% of children in the country live in a home that meets all 4 of these qualities. And in particular, when families don't see that they have strengths to draw on, it's particularly negatively impacting. So you're in a position to help families find their strengths, to stay hopeful in difficult times, to reach out for help, to encourage and reduce that stigma, because we self-stigmatize. When we've been stigmatized, we self-stigmatize. And so people often don't come forward to use the resources we're making available to them. How many people experience that? Lack of uptake is what they call it. And then we blame the family. So you're in a position to really build family resilience, strengths, sense of hope, staying engaged, not hiding out of shame that we have a problem. Parent-child connection, which often shows up as just talking about things that matter, making it a point to share about emotional things or things that are hard. And then parent coping. How can we help parents cope that, it's not like it's ever going to get easier, but our identity about who we are as a person often is what's underneath poor parental coping. The self-blame is huge in the studies of parent coping being much lower when they feel like everything's their fault and they don't feel like they're part of a support system. So basically what we found, again, sorry to show you graphs, but I know some people want to see them, is that this is for children. The blue line here is children with no ACEs. So again, looking at the best case scenario, and with 0 to 1 of these family resilience and connection indicators, about 26.8 exhibit those qualities of flourishing, the children. And when we have 4 to 6, it goes up to 58%. Now, there's still a gap between 58% and 100. And that's a bigger conversation about society and what's going on otherwise, right? But it's a huge jump. And the same thing for children with 4 or more ACEs. So there's a lot we can be doing by promoting family resilience, staying connected during difficult times, reaching out for help, staying hopeful, and seeing that you have strengths to draw on, finding the strengths that you have. Everyone has strengths all the time. Okay, so the next study, which I had the pleasure of doing with Jennifer Jones, who's in the back. Thank you, Jennifer. Would not have been possible without her leadership to get some items in the Wisconsin Burfus, which is no small thing. I've gotten a lot of items in national surveys and it can be really harrowing. So they were able to put in a number of items, and then we worked among all the were put in there to see, could we create a positive childhood experiences index, kind of like the adverse childhood experiences index? So that was the science behind it, is does it hold together like a cumulative score, just like ACEs? And how does that work? And which ones seem to be having the biggest impact? So how many of you have seen this paper in JAMA, the Positive Childhood Experiences paper? Okay. I encourage you to look at it. It's pretty straightforward. We usually, when we write, and I try really hard to put it in really plain language, that basically this study showed that positive childhood experiences are very related to adult mental health and relational health. So whether you have your own social supports and have your needs met in that way. And the experiences were feeling able to talk to your family about your feelings. Again, this thing about emotions and feelings and cutting off from feelings is very dangerous. We actually are feeling all the time. We're thinking all the time. We're breathing all the time. If you stopped breathing, it would not be good. You can't stop thinking. You just have to try to notice what you're thinking and get, regulate it. But you're also feeling all the time. You really aren't never not feeling. And if we're cut off from that, it has a lot of biological effects. It actually even changes our genes. So the studies on epigenetics are showing it's through the pathway of our emotions. And numbed emotions are emotions. And so being able to talk about your feelings is a very important positive childhood experience. Feeling your family stood by you during difficult times, not whether they thought they did, but whether you experienced it. Again, it's back to your lived experience being so important to what's actually driving your biological system and your sense of identity, right? It's your experience. So when you're working with children and families, what is the actual experience? Being attuned to their experience. Can you feel them connected? Or are they tuning out? And to slow down to the pace of connection, to slow down to the pace of trust, and not being so anxious to get through your list because it may not make any difference to get through the list if nobody's there with you. And so we have to really understand that connection is important. Enjoying participation in community traditions, feeling a sense of belonging in the community is very, very important. And in fact, Jennifer and I were talking last night about even if you have all these positive experiences in the home, if you live in a community where you feel like you do not matter, because you don't look right or you're just not from the right place or what have you, the hit is constant. And that also is a very important thing. Feeling a sense of belonging in high school. Not that you're popular, not that you get perfect grades, but you walk in and you feel, I belong here. It's belonging, mattering. These are the things, and so on. And so what we basically found through a long, laborious process was that with more positive experiences at every level of ACEs, adults were much less likely to have depression. But look at the numbers of this. So if you have 6 to 7 positive childhood experiences, and you can do the math in your head, I'm not sure what what you would report, about 21% who have 6 to 7 who have 4 or more ACEs, which is a high ACE score, as you know, have depression, compared to 60% if you only had 0 to 2 of those positive experiences. So that's really gigantic for a study. Usually you see studies and they're reporting small little odds ratios, and it's exciting when you get a positive result, but this was just off the charts in terms of what I expected anyway. So we can, at least say that even though ACEs are highly predictive of depression, positive childhood experiences that occur right alongside them at the same time, because they co-occur, are incredibly protective and can come from a number of places, including your interactions with families and the community's interaction with families, and how we create a culture of mattering. So there's a few paradoxes I want to make sure I leave you with, and we're going to use all of this. I need to check the time. Okay, we're good. I want to leave you with some paradoxes to consider. And so are you all still with me? Okay. All right. Woo. Okay. So going from fixing to connecting, that's hard when you get paid to check boxes, right? But if you override connection and presence of families and children with you as you're doing what you're doing, what are you doing? What's happening? What's actually happening? So it challenges when we take on this perspective of flourishing and the importance of connection, and really the fact that we are co-regulating each other all the time. And if a family isn't feeling safe, even if you're safe, they may not feel that way because we self-stigmatize when we've been stigmatized. How do we navigate this so that if we're going to help, we make sure we're helping and not just checking boxes and saying we tried and it just didn't work? So we can actually make a big difference. So I'm going to talk about a few paradoxes. The first is that we learn to walk by falling down, right? So good things happen as a result of things that you think are hard. How many people have that experience in life? Yeah, only a few. Come on. It's good to raise your hand. It's been an hour, a little less than an hour. Okay, great. So the paradox of positive experiences, and a couple of these slides are definitely more dense because I'm assuming you might want them, and I'm putting the references in, is that it's recognizing and accepting negative emotions and thoughts that helps us heal. So pushing down isn't possible. It affects your neurobiological system immensely, but it's a big part of our culture, right? I mean, my father is from England, no less. Okay, so talk about stiff upper lip. I mean, there was no opportunity to be hurt, even if like a brick fell on your toe, which did to me one day. It's like, well, you got another one on your other foot. So what are you complaining about, right? So we have, and so certainly we want to support people's sense of strength and resilience, and the fact that you do have another toe on your other foot and the other one will heal. But if we habitually, if we have a habit of never recognizing what's hard and not being able to talk with each other about it, it actually really, really is what leads to the health problems. And so this is just a study showing that people who try to resist negative emotions are more likely to experience psychiatric symptoms in particular. And of course, psychiatric symptoms cascade into often health behaviors, right? Like substance use and, things that aren't good for us, because the nervous system always wins. When we're, nervous systems are really, really agitated, they win, because we're biological systems and we need to do something to help regulate ourselves. And sometimes those things that aren't as good for us, they do the trick in the moment. And so you need relief. Thank God we all want to be out of pain. That's a good thing. But can we learn some ways to do it that actually lead to more well-being and more healing rather than more self-harm? And so one of the main things is that when we accept that we have negative emotions and we can talk about it, but even if you can't talk about it, just accept they're there and make space, because it's like if you have a negative emotion, it doesn't mean it's wiping out everything that's good, right? You can check in with that part that's grateful and feeling good, and you may have a long list still of all the things you're grateful for and all the things you feel good about. And you have these negative emotions. We're not dichotomous that way. We are a multitude. I can't remember who the poet said, but accepting as a habit emotions is very healing. And it's when you do that, it does not diminish your positive emotions, but it lowers your negative emotions. So having a habit of accepting our mental experiences that are difficult lowers our negative emotions and lowers our negative emotions and doesn't impact our already present positive emotions. So that's important. And that's related a little bit to why we see so much connection with mental emotional. So I wanted to just read you this poem. You don't need to drown the darkness with light. You don't need to replace negativity with positivity. You bring the darkness to the light like an offering. That means you honor what is first. Before you try to change it, you meet yourself where you're at before moving forward. And I would add, because that's where you're at. And it's loving to meet ourselves where we're at, and including the people we're working with. Then you can bring light to the places and situation where there's barely any light left. You can give someone love, even though they're not acting with love. That's radical. You can light another candle. You can handle hard things. We have we're being called to radical resilience. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the workshop and reflect on what that means. But so this is some of what I would say the research supports this poem by Jennifer Healy, where your feelings are your superpowers too. And having feelings doesn't take offline your thoughts, your power, your strength, anything. It just brings in more possibility, more of who you are and what's actually driving a lot of what's difficult. So the other thing I want to point out from the research is pitfalls, what I call possibility pitfalls. The first is toxic positivity. It does not work to say, just get over it. Why do you feel that way? Like my dad said, you have another toe on the other foot. I'm still recovering from his toxic positivity, which is another way to call that kind of, we don't suffer. We don't suffer. And yet, we do. And we have joy, and they're related. Like the inner, you guys have all seen, someone last night mentioned the, what's the movie? Inside Out. Have you all seen Inside Out? If you have kids, you've seen Inside Out, the animated film, where at the end of the day, suffering and joy really needed each other in order for either of them to heal and experience the goodness of life. So toxic positivity is a positivity pitfall, and also avoiding what I call the hard, easy cognitive bias. So some of the things that we need to do in order to foster well-being and thriving for ourselves and for children and families and in our communities and in our organizations is actually easy. But we think it already exists because it's so easy, but it doesn't. And then other things that are actually easy, we think are easy, are actually quite hard. And we don't pay enough attention to how do we actually create a culture of mattering if we value that. How do we do that? There's actually an anatomy to that. You can break it down. You can measure it. Like I always tell Roger, you can measure it. You can measure these things. So we mistake what's hard for being easy, and we mistake what's easy for being hard. The things you do every day with all of the families and children you serve, if that's your position in life, are you might not do them because they're easy for you to do, and you don't realize the power of it and how much you matter. On the same count, there might be something that you think is just there because why wouldn't it be? Of course, we have a culture of mattering. Of course, everyone matters, but it doesn't. So here's a little study from the University of Texas. It's a randomized trial looking at depression in teens. And basically, they taught some teens a growth mindset by having them just read a little case study about an athlete who didn't perform the way they wanted to and how that athlete related to that failure, which they felt was a failure, versus another athlete who really dealt with it as a growth opportunity, having a developmental orientation toward life. When things don't go well, what can I learn? I'm not stuck here. It's not the way it's always going to be. Maybe even getting reflection on, well, maybe that's not for me. Maybe there's something else I want to do, but staying in that positive related, living and relating self in a positive way to what's hard really, really impacted depression. And a year later, the depression symptoms were still reduced by just reading a case study that illustrated somebody that they respected, an athlete, who actually exhibited a growth mindset. That failure did not lead to them giving up. It led to them actually being interested and curious and trying and reflecting, and how big of a difference that made just by reading that. The other is, this is from ACEs Connection, and which is now PACEs Connection. And it's really where this was a forum that was held with some people who had been targeted by the justice system inappropriately and never got an apology. And so this was somebody who just said all the time, all he ever needed was an apology. And how powerful, just recognizing, wow, you've been hurt and I had something to do with that. And I didn't know that I did that. And I'm sorry. How powerful that is. That's an example of something that's easy to do and that we underestimate the power of it. And so it's very, very important that we value how much power we have to do the small things and to not forget to do them and to think about that. On the other hand, there are hard things. We have a lot of people who need help, who are not receptive to it, who aren't seeking it. And when we happen to find them in school, or they maybe don't come to school, we've lost them. Somebody mentioned last night, losing people from, that we know need help. How do we handle that? Because the people who often need our help the most are the ones that are least receptive to it. We have a lot of dropout rate from parenting classes for the parents who most need support. And what's happening, or it looks like what's happening, one big piece that you can impact, that we can impact, is this feeling of being stigmatized and not mattering. So this is a study that looks at youth, reaching youth, and feelings of not mattering really lead to a sense of perceived stigmatization which ultimately is self-stigmatizing. Like, I will not reach out because I know they're already sitting with a sense of I don't matter and expecting to be stigmatized. So you don't even get a chance to meet them in a different way. And this is really something that is going on out there. So how do we navigate it? And it's not that they don't have help seeking desires, which is often what we put on people. Well, they don't want help. It's them, not me. Most people who need help want help. If they feel safe, they want help. They do. But can they get help safely? Can they get help in a way that keeps their dignity alive and where they feel that they matter and that they're not being stigmatized? But when somebody's already self-stigmatizing, how do we undo that Gordian knot? And it really is through this cultivation of safety and mattering, which may be the first time a person ever felt that they mattered, is when you actually were present and looked at them. Didn't try to fix them, but just connected and made space for what could happen next. Very powerful. So these are studies that I want to tell you about. And so what is mattering? Well, most people who study this would say it's a biological and social need. When we're born, if we don't feel we're being looked at and connected to, our biology or neuro, everything goes haywire, right? So it's definitely a biological need to feel like I matter in the spaces in which I'm in with other people. And if not, it occupies an incredible amount of energy and a lot of damage is done. So the elements of mattering are, first, are people even aware of me? Am I the object of others' attention? Do people even know I exist? Do I feel like seen at all, regarded at all when I walk in the door? Do people say good morning or not? And if you studied that, you'd be shocked about how differentially we greet some people and not others. We have a lot of bias going on. And so in schools, there's a whole tradition now of every child being greeted, no matter what. And people study it and it makes a big difference. So awareness, importance. I am the object of another person's concern. When I hurt, and you can always see when someone's hurting, almost always, there's a gesture made toward me. There's a concern made toward me. And if you unpack a lot of the, evidence-based studies that are going on and how do we promote flourishing and heal from trauma and all that, some of these pieces are in there, right? Am I an object of another's concern? Do others invest resources in me? Promote my welfare? Is attentive to my needs? Provides emotional support? Takes pride in me? Cares about what I do? Criticizes me for my own good? That's somebody being concerned about you. That's a radical act sometimes, being able to tell somebody something that's hard to tell them. That shows care and inconveniences themselves for me and sees me as, I'm not going to define what ego is, but listens to me. So the last one is reliance. Others actually look to me for things. So the magic of asking a child to do something around the house and how wonderful that makes them feel. Would you help me fold the laundry? Giving a sense of agency, relying on everyone says something to offer. Everyone has a strength, find it and let them help you. Let them know that you need them too, that we have a mutual system going on here. It does, how you do that in different contexts will vary, but we all need each other. If somebody shows up and you're giving them therapy or doing some kind of support for them, and they impact you too. And so how can we keep it alive that we do look to each other? So seeks advice, depends on me, seeks support from me. Now, this isn't obviously there's a whole developmental appropriateness of this with children and adults, but I just want to say there's a way that it works across the board. Trusts me to be there, values my contribution. And so if we're going to have people feel that they matter, they have to have voice. They have to know that they can speak up. They have voice and that somebody's listening to that voice. And if we don't make spaces in our work, in our community, or in our small little counseling units or schools or healthcare visit rooms or wherever we are for listening and giving voice, we are diminishing a sense of mattering and creating hierarchies of value that really have a huge impact on our well-being. So these are the elements of mattering. And when we do the workshop today, I'm going to ask you to reflect on this for yourself. But the bottom line is that there's more and more studies showing that this sense of whether you matter or not is really explaining some of the big impacts between having ACEs and having some psychological and mental health issues, like a sense of loneliness. And so there's more and more research going on, but especially emotional abuse, children who have emotional abuse or neglect, really, that's probably one of the biggest places where we end up not feeling we matter, when we're not seen for our emotional being or we're ignored. And so there's a lot we can do for each other in that right now. Okay, so mattering, I would say, is a health promotion and prevention strategy. And without it, people can feel devalued. It promotes relational disconnection. Actually, sorry, I'm reading this the wrong way. With promoting mattering, we prevent the devaluation of people. We prevent the relational disconnection. We prevent disengagement, which is really key because we can't help people who don't engage, because 90% of what we're trying to do is helping others do what they need to choose and do, either with their children or in their workplace. And it prevents community disintegration. So I'm just raising this up for you to think about. And of course, wanting to leave you with this before I start to close, that how important this is, because we do have a lot of diversity in how people are doing. I'm just going to show this because it's not close enough for me to do the animations the way that I wanted to. So just let me explain what this is. So we created something called the Integrated Child Risk Index, which looks at children who have special needs or mental, emotional, behavioral needs, or any kind of health functional problem or real serious functional difficulty, and then looked at those social health risks I talked to you about and the relational health risks. And really, it was the complexity of whether a child had more than one of those. So if you have a special need, but you don't have social risks or relational risks, you're doing a lot better. And so it was the complexity of these three different domains of being, which is more taking into account the whole person. And so that's what we validated, was that it was the complexity of types of risk that really were, again, that cumulative index types of thing, but also types of risk. So if you have social risks and medical risks, it's very different than if you add in relational and so on. So you can look at the paper, but basically about 61.2% of children in Idaho have one or more medical, social, or relational risks. And about 41.4% publicly insured in Idaho have two or more of these domains. Okay. And then we can break it down, but it was really just a simple way, like you could integrate this into some of your assessments to find out kind of where you're likely to see the risk, because then we went on to look at how this relates to flourishing and school engagement and positive outcomes. And it's very, very predictive, even ER use, urgent care. So if we want to look at efficient use of healthcare resources, all kinds of things related to school readiness. So we looked at school readiness, school engagement, and a lot of positive outcomes or negative healthcare utilization. So healthcare utilization that was more urgent and emergent, and unnecessary hospitalizations was up with more of these types of risks. So it's a simple way to think about it. And so all of this risks and protective factors and all of the different conversations we're having have led to a huge amount of reports on how we need to come together as communities to create integrated systems of care. Okay, so how many of you are involved in some kind of thing or are aware of some kind of effort to bring different sectors together, school and health and child welfare and so on and so forth? Is that a common thing? Yeah. Okay. So everyone is. And how do they go? So I was at first in my career going to study community partnerships, because that's what I was all about, was community partnerships. And I went around the country and studied 15, and some worked and some didn't, and why, and trying to identify that. I ended up not being able to do that for my PhD because I went to the University of Chicago and they wouldn't let me do something like that. It was too qualitative. But I can tell you that they often don't work. They fail. They're often at the hands of one charismatic leader and one round of funding that happens. And so how do we create enduring community partnerships that actually can go the distance to start to create these integrated systems of care that are all serving the same children and families, and yet often are pitted against each other? If we do something right, I might lose my job is a big one. People will admit it if you ask them, if you measure it. There's a lot of worry of hospitals. Well, I've heard hospitals say, if you do any better on your social determinants of health and we end up with fewer kids in the NICU or the PICU, pediatric intensive care, I'm going to have to fire another nurse. and then the union's going to be after me. So this like faulty incentives that we have are often at play when we come together. So we have to create safety in these contexts too. And one of the places that is a huge focus is well visits. And so I promised I would talk a little bit about this. So how many of you are practitioners involved in some way in preventive and developmental services for children? Yeah, so got to be more than that. Okay, all right, well then I'm going to use this as an illustration. So we have a lot of things we're doing already that we can leverage. And one of them is well visits. There's 15 that are supposed to happen in the first 5 years of life when we can really make an impact on families. It's where families of young children go before they go to school. It's an opportunity to create trust and look at the different layers of risk, but also protective factors and promote relational health. So it's a huge focus nationally. And the performance is there's only 10% of kids in the country who get all of four basic components of preventive services. About a third have developmental screening. So they enter school without ever having their development assessed. And only about half receive mental health services that they need. And only about half meet this criteria of a medical home where you have a usual source of care, where you're, that's culturally responsive and family centered. So we have a lot of opportunity and it's all paid for. Every health plan pays for this. It's a law. Even the guidelines exist. And we know that when it goes well, we have more family resilience, more parent-child connection, but it depends on that trust and relationship with the provider. So you can make an analogy maybe to your own world. And yet, it's impossible. It's impossible to do all the screens. It's impossible to, and if you just throw a bunch of material at a family, fill out all these forms, and it's not scored or reported, and you spend all your time together just collecting data, it doesn't really serve anyone. And so our work was to really, how can we create a family-centered IT-based solution that can allow families to engage? So when you come together, you have all the information you need at the table, scored and presented in an empowering way with resources cooked up to it. So we created something like that. We started 20 years ago, believe it or not. This particular tool is called the Well Visit Planner, where anybody here, a home visitor, a child welfare worker, a pediatrician can get an account. It's free. We worked on it with HRSA, and you just basically get a URL, you get your own branded website, you send it to your families, and then you get a summary, and the family does too. They get their data back. So this is about empowering families and making sure you're not just taking a bunch of data from them and they walk in your door and then they walk in your door and they're asked about ACEs there and they're asked about ACEs there and they're asked about depression and they get asked all the time about things, but nothing's ever either done because it's too hard. You can collect data, but how do you score it and how do you make meaning out of it and how do you connect resources to it so that your time is used? So this is just an example of ways we can innovate to really help create a relational system of care where we don't spend all our time collecting data that we don't use, doing it over and over again to the same families, which is scary for families or irritating at best, and then not ever use the data. And so it feels like you're checking a box, you're not helping them. So this is an example of some innovations, and there are many, many more out there, but families don't even know that they can talk with teachers or pediatricians about things. We hear over and over again. I had no idea I could talk about how I'm doing or how my family's doing. So the topics that we're bringing up, a lot of families don't realize that that's okay. And so it's very important. So I can tell you more about this if you're interested, but it is one way to start to get up underneath the mental health crisis. Because we know if we get in early and we work with families to build hope, to let them know they're not alone, to speak with them in a language that they understand and not speak above them, because that's about you, not them. If you want to be understood, you have to speak with people in a way that they understand you and be at the watch of whether they understand and keep working on it until they do, because it's about them. And so we get to grow, we get to build our skills in this way and to really share decision making. So when families have reports of child development issues or ACEs, to say, do you think we have a concern? Do you want to do something about it? What do you think we could do? Do you already have something in mind? before we go on and say to them, here's what you need to do, and you need to do it by this time. So it's really fostering a fully engaged approach, because that's how things will move. That's how things will change. So this is an analogy that can cut across home visiting and a lot of different contexts, depending on where you are. So the bottom line is evidence, all this data, supportive policies, which we have more and more of, even though it's hard still, we have more and more supportive policies where we at least can talk about this. It's set as a goal, right, in schools to build resilience, to, you know, and I know that's changing in some places, but we have a lot, but people, evidence and supportive policies don't translate innovations. People do. We need to bring our communities together to be the synapses. We need a partnership orientation to be the synapse. And yet, in order to do, there's lots of platforms. So those of you who aren't familiar with them, there are a lot of policy reports that say a lot of the same things from a different angle on how do we create relationship and engagement-based screening, intervention, and healing. How do we create cross-agency, cross-sector training and coaching so that we're sharing that training and we're not all being trained in different ways and don't have a common language. Create sustainable partnerships that have a backbone and are supported, and really go into what I call an era, a launch and learn era, where we don't know yet what's going to work, but we get the opportunity and how we're funded to try. So we can enter an era of experimentation, which is what Jack Shonkoff calls it, if you know who Jack Shonkoff is. But it's how do we create an era of experimentation so that we can grow, so that we can learn. So if we're always saying we only get to use this evidence-based thing in this fidelity way, but that doesn't really match up with what's needed for your families, what's needed in your community. So definitely funding and evaluating our interventions and how we do our work differently so that we can allow for us to discover and co-create. So there's a lot going on here. And at the end of the day, it comes back to mindsets. Do we believe in change? Do we believe in positive health? Do we believe that we can do better? Do we believe and have hope? Do we see strengths? And if we don't, we have to face that first. Scarcity mindsets, rugged individualism. These are all important, concepts. We need to be aware of these things. But if we take it too far, we're going to be hitting a wall where we can't change the relationships and connections and the power dynamics that are really up underneath changing policy. So if we want to change policy and practices and all the things that really are going to enable innovative approaches, we have to deal with the relationships that are in place, the power dynamics, and often create more of a sense of we all matter, and ultimately change the mental models. So in the workshop, we're going to look at the iceberg model of we see things up here, but what's underneath it are our structures and our behaviors, and what's underneath all of that are the mindsets. And so how can we work a little bit harder to look at the mindsets and think creatively about how can we create the mindsets that are needed to move into an era of possibility and manifest the flourishing paradigm, which is a relationships paradigm. So hopefully we will do that. And I have 1 minute left. So I'm going to end with my six, actually I'm going to end with my 6 wishes. So these are my 6 wishes for really transforming an ecosystem, creating an ecosystem to take healing and flourishing to scale. And the first is to free our brilliance, because I think we know a lot intuitively, but we're not necessarily free to do it because our resources and our reward systems are not aligned with our values and what we know is possible. So that has to do with payment and incentives. So freeing our brilliance by having our systems align so that we can really, really get creative and do what we know we can do. The next is take on transparency. So that feedback loop about how we all are doing. We need data and feedback loops ongoing. And to be able to use the data in a way that we are excited to get it. So we're more curious than afraid to find out how I'm doing, how are you doing? And we start to work on how we can learn from each other. So taking on transparency is embedding what I would call a healthy alert and continuous feedback system. So some analogies to brain science here. The next is to become we ninjas. And we just have to admit that we haven't been that good at working together. There's a lot of fear that we bring, a lot of control. I want everything to stay the same, but here we are together to try to transform. And so we need to take very seriously, what are the skills and mindsets that can help us really become good at working together and fully engage the affiliative system to go from fixing to connecting. Prioritize possibilities is my fourth wish. And this is where we have an unstoppable habit of hope and healing. And if we don't believe that's possible and we can't keep our hope, then we know where that's going to lead. And so we have to be at the watch of that. Then we're in a safe place, I think, to take on trauma, which we do need to take on, and to really do it from a healing point of view, from a possibilities point of view. And finally, to brave being, to be aware that your being is really what is impacting the other. So your being is about their well-being. And that's a big shift in the services sectors and in our work, that we can't just be anonymous. We can't not, be aware that we're really impacting each other and those we serve every minute. And so to really focus on your own well-being is critical. So those are my 6 wishes. And we will now have a break. And after the break, hopefully we can come together and just do a little more reflection and talking as a group and have some hands-on conversation. Thank you for your attention. Yeah, thank you.
I'm Jason. Nice to meet you. Just let me know where you're.
I think that they are going to share it. I'm going to send it to PDF. And why don't I ask? You can ask in the front, but I am going to have it. Thank you so much. This is the first time I've been out in front of a crowd. I've been out a lot of things. Yeah, yeah. What do you do? Yep, I will. Yeah, definitely need this one. Do you want me to just? Alrighty.
Although I hate to break it up, because this is really what all this is about. This is why we come together, right? Is to learn from each other. And so really appreciate all the chatter in the room. It's terrific. We haven't heard that kind of chatter. You know, that does not happen on Zoom. I will tell you a fact. It does not, there's not this much chatter on Zoom. All right, so I'm going to try again. That was sort of like a really nice way of offering the opportunity to like kind of get focused again. Now I'm giving that teacher stare around the room. It's not working. Oh, we'll do clapping. My preschool friends, you know, sending me vibes, do the clapping thing. They like that. Okay, we got it. All right. So let's one more time appreciate all the, you know, all that we learned today. I mean, amazing amount of information, and we're going to have all those slides available. Well, probably by next week. So we'll make sure that everybody knows when they go up. We'll either do it, I don't know. We'll figure out how we're going to do it. It'll probably go up on our website, and we'll just give you the link to that, so that you can, you know, get more engrossed in some of those, some of that data. And you know, if it draws you to, or if it leads you to looking at some of those journal articles, they're all out there too. So, anyway, so that's our story. So I think what we're going to do is,
Sorry, I'm one of those people who I can see up close, but not far away. And I can't see my slides if I put these on, but you know, so.
So Christina's gonna lead us in a little exercise, and then we're gonna offer up some opportunity to ask some, you know, for you to ask some questions or to make some comments. So think about some of the things that maybe came up for you during the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I always have such mixed feelings. Capturing people's attention for a whole hour and a half is unnatural for me because I'm a very conversational person. But I also wanted to give you the storyline and kind of leave you with some things you can use in your own work. So thank you for your attention. But right now, for the next period of time, I think we have till 12:15. Is that right? I'm going to share some things, but mostly it's as a way to set up a conversation that you can have with each other or that we can have in the full group. And what I thought we could start with is a little let it steep exercise. So for those of you who may know about some of the science of how we can regulate ourselves or even get in touch, there's a lot of things that you can do, like even just like putting your hands across over your chest actually connects your right and left brain. And then if you just kind of close your eyes and take a purposeful breath. Letting it steep, letting the steam come off, whatever you need to do. Aware of your breath. Just notice if it's shallow or deep. Don't try to change it. And the last thing, maybe just feel the weight of your body in the chair. Let yourself be supported by it. And then you can maybe bring your hands just right over your heart for a second. And we could do a lot more of this, but I wanted to at least just sort of have a moment of just being present with ourselves after having been so out there and taking in so much. So maybe reflect on any questions you might have so we can take some time now to just have a conversation. And then I have prepared options. One is to, you know, really reflect on some of what I shared, how it plays out in your work, whether you buy it or not. What does it mean? Also looking at your own flourishing and what do you think about that and how to support it? have a little iceberg exercise possibly of looking at the system you're in and thinking about the mindsets that drive it and all of that. So we have some options, but we could also just talk. So why don't we open it up to questions or comments or reflections or poetry reading or whatever it is that you're inspired to share. I got some poems too. If you want me, I could read some poems to you. Yeah, there we go. Okay. This is where I'm putting my glasses on.
You spoke about engagement in schools as a way that we measure how kids are doing.
Yeah.
When you say engagement, what do you mean? Is it looking at how well they perform on standardized testing? Is it they're
Right.
coming to school every day so that
Right.
school has a good attendance record?
Yeah.
I'm just curious about that.
No, absolutely. As soon as we start looking at data, we want to know what went into it. So the school engagement measure is actually reported by parents with items that we know that parents can observe things about their children. And it's one of them is really reporting whether the child it cares about doing well in school, whether they, are good about wanting to do their homework or doing their homework. And also, just engaging in the process of showing up and wanting to learn and appearing like they care. And so it's that, it's not the standardized tests. Mm-hmm. And if you want to know about any of the measures, I have a website called childhealthdata.org, and you can just go in there and type in the search feature or measure, and you'll be getting all the information you want. Pretty much everything that I presented today, you can find out how to measure it.
Can I ask a follow-up?
And we have Idaho data, of course. Yeah.
So you were saying that, this feeling of belonging isn't about being popular at school.
Yes.
So what is it? I mean, so how do we, and I always am, because as I've looked at that over, now
Yeah.
a couple of years, like, what does that mean, in terms of people, kids, who don't necessarily want to go to the football game or don't
Right.
want to do the pep rally, don't want to be part of the, what might be the normal structure of,
Yeah.
of school. How do we create alternatives or?
Right. Well, when I talked about mattering, there were the three pieces. One is people are aware of me and care about me and count on me or think I have something to offer. And so what would be some of the ways we could make sure all children experience that regardless of where they are in terms of their engagement in sports? So what might we do? You probably already are doing some of those things if you're in a school. I mean, I can share some of my ideas, but I'm curious, how might you do that?
Anybody have thoughts on, I know a number
Yeah,
of you work
back
at
there.
schools and,
Mm-hmm.
any things that you would do?
That's right. Yeah.
Greeting each child in school so that they know that they're
Yeah.
part of the group, that they're part of there. I don't know that everybody could hear that. So
Yeah. And doing it with intention, because like I said, whether we like it or not, we feel each other, and authenticity is felt. You just can't fool. You may think your mind you can say whatever you want, but people read what they feel. That's what the impact is. And so it's authentic, and just a second of really looking at a person. And so then you have to think, well, do I actually care? And if you don't, then that's something else you have to deal with. But greeting each child with a moment of connection, it can be really quick. Definitely. Yeah.
One of the things that we teach kids with Bikers Against Bullies is random acts of kindness.
Right.
Simply just telling somebody, hey, your hair looks great today, and
Right.
walking away, not
Right.
knowing that person makes
That's
a big
right.
difference as well.
Not only is that so true what you say, it makes a huge difference. Honestly, someone could be 80 and look back on their life and say, what is the nicest thing anyone ever did? And said, somebody just came up to me and said, my hair looked nice. And man, that stuck in me. Yeah.
I was just going to share something. At Head Start this year, our bus driver quit on the first day.
could you put the mic more in your mouth? Sorry.
In my mouth?
Yeah.
There we go.
Like
Okay.
an ice cream
Come
cone.
on.
Like an
I
ice
work
cream
with
cone.
Head Start. I'm an early childhood educator.
Yeah.
But at Head Start, we lost our bus driver day one. But the flip side was escorted by a family advocate and told,
Yeah.
you know, that individual to the classroom and then at the end of the day, return. So, wow,
Yeah.
I guess we're doing that right.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when you're not, and that's partly because of COVID, right? Oh, no. Okay.
We are in the classroom. It's just that we ended up being down a bus driver. So the flip
Oh, I
side,
see.
the benefit of that was each child was escorted and
Yeah.
greeted and felt like they belonged
Yeah.
on the way into the classroom and then on the way out.
Yeah.
So
Right.
twice
Right.
in one day. And I think it set the tone
Yeah.
for the whole school year.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, so some of the things we measure is whether you feel like your teacher or your provider listens to you. And, you know, it's not like you have to do it every time. If you've ever done it and they know you mean it, you get away. You don't have to like always do it over and over again. It's really that authenticity, even one time, and then when it's needed, that counts. So that's enduring, even if you can't do it every single day. Yeah. I don't know what you just said, but it looks like it was important. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes having a community school, but the school I work with did. Kids brought whatever pennies they might have or other to help the firefighters and the law enforcement. And it was a week of that. And so it made everybody count. And they either,
Yeah.
if they couldn't bring anything,
Yeah.
they went out and helped collect it from other classrooms.
Right.
So just that helps engage.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think it can be as simple as just saying their name to them, you know,
Yeah.
meeting them and acknowledging that
That's
you know
right.
their name, you know who they are, you know they're there.
Right. It matters so much, no matter how much capacity you have. You know, I know in our department, people are really busy, and, you know, when we do debriefings, even we can feel like we don't matter because we're just attuned to the people around us. It's like mattering to somebody out there doesn't matter. It's really the people around me. So, yeah.
I work with a juvenile inpatient drug treatment program. And before that, I was with education, working in the public schools.
Yeah.
Just making the connection with a student and learning their name. Even if they're not one of your, you know, direct students or clients, but being able to acknowledge them somewhere else, running into them at the store. Hi, how are you doing? And calling them by name.
Mm-hmm.
Letting them know that you do know them and acknowledge them, seeing them someplace that's not where you typically would be seeing them or treating them, and acknowledging them as a person, letting them
Right.
know that even though you're not necessarily with them at the moment, you still know who they are.
Right.
And that you cared enough to remember their name.
Right.
Can make a huge difference with even some of my former students who I still run into around town. It's huge. And we see the same thing with Bikers Against Bullies, kids that we've
Right.
seen. They come, and it's really interesting to see children that we've worked with in the schools come running up to us in stores with their parents, and their parents are like, why are you hugging this person?
Right.
You know, but we can, we can acknowledge the children and
Right.
let them know that we do know them.
Right.
We do care, and that we acknowledge them for who they are.
Right. So people are aware of me. There's lots of ways we can do that. And then I'm cared about, you know, and I'm valued for who I am or what I can bring. So the kindness, the random act of kindness, I don't know if any of you have studied nonviolent communications, but it's a communication training program. Yeah. And one of the things is how to give a compliment. And if you think about it in your own body, is when you say, I like your hair, you know, to say even the next step to even make it like you bring value. And here's how it impacted me. When I saw your new haircut, it made me smile. You know, like you impact me in a positive way. So there's something about you that contributes to me. And that is like, how do we weave that part in too? Yeah. Or even noticing you seem a little sad today or withdrawn. I just want you to know I noticed that. Maybe you can't fix it. So that caring about, so there's a richness of all kinds of ideas if we put on a board we could come up with. So maybe some more here. Yeah.
So I've been working a lot with the concepts of empathy and active listening with kiddos and all the way up through professionals.
Mhm.
And I think one of the critical things for me in mattering is how do we feel heard, and practicing that empathy, and especially with youth, empathy and active listening. As we teach them those skills, they understand that they matter.
Right.
And then they start to be the supports for each other,
Right.
encouraging that they matter. So it's not always our responsibility. And I actually got to see this in practice a couple times doing assemblies and working with student groups, kindergarten through 12th
Right.
grade, where we actually had them write down or draw, depending on their age, a feeling word. And even with some adult groups that were willing to participate, and just write it down on a piece of paper, crumple it up, throw it towards the front of the room. And then we all talked about how all of those feelings matter.
Right.
And we got to express that, and people got to understand and have empathy towards the struggles they were both, that they were facing, or that they could understand for another person. So I think empathy and encouraging that deep development of empathy and presence
Right.
through active listening is huge from what I've
Do
been
you have
working with.
a specific tip that you use? So how do you, what's this? You just mentioned one about empathy for feelings, which I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm the only one. So we don't really normalize it. But what about active listening?
So like an activity for active listening.
Mhm.
So some of the things that I do for active listening are just practicing, like having somebody say something and seeing how that person the partner can maybe repeat it back, or seeing how people follow along in regards to, somebody just said this to you about their emotional state or what they went through today. What did you feel from that? Like, did you pull a feeling from that? And if so, what
Mhm.
is your response? Are you responding with something that you've experienced? Or are you responding to what they've experienced?
Mhm.
Who's more like, from that conversation, what's your takeaway? What would be your next step? And it's of course very different for the different age groups that I've worked with, and for the professionals as well. But
Yeah, definitely. So active listening isn't just listening and repeating back, but really showing that you understand and how you do that. So it's really more like, how do we build this into everything you're already doing? So a lot of what you've shared is like sort of in the course of your moments, and to really, again, value how much we all matter in that way to each other's sense of belonging. What else? Yeah, or several more if you want.
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of work inside the juvenile detention centers in our area with kids with astronomical ACE scores.
Wow.
And just letting them know that no matter what's going on, there's always somebody out there for them,
Yep.
being in the community for them, talking about things that are relevant to them instead of just going in and lecturing them about what they should be doing.
Right.
We're going in and doing a lot of work on like what's important to you, what can we help you through.
Right, exactly.
And you really do, like I run into a ton of kids every time I go that are like, we just need somebody to love us
Right.
and be there, because they don't have parents that are there.
That's right.
And so it does rely on the community to come out and say, well, I care about you. You're not my kid, but I care about you.
Right.
I'm here for you. And then giving them outside resources to say, here's somebody that's stable that can help you
Right.
when you transition out of here eventually.
What I liked about what you said that I want to emphasize is that you ask them about what they think they might want to address, what they think might help them, what they already know about that might help them and encourage. And so having it come from within, having them say, I think what I would like is this, and then you support them in that.
We'll give one more shot if there's anybody with a burning question or comment that they really want to make. Just be a regular comment. I might have made that sound way too like you had to do something momentous. Something really juicy. It's something really good.
Yeah, maybe a little more too on the valuing. Like other people look to me and I have something to contribute to you too. Yeah.
Well, thank you for offering up all those ideas and your own experiences.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So any other things that came up about that you want to ask? I'm going to maybe set up some things so we can actually have more of a conversation with each other and as a group. but it is important, just like, is anything on the surface? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Now I can take these off so I can see my slides. Okay. So I'm going to try to move toward this. I prepared something, but because this is meant to be more organic, I'm not going to follow it completely. But oops, that's not. Oh, having a very strange experience over here. What's showing up there is not what's on. Oh, here we go. I have to open it again. Okay. So what I was hoping is that maybe we could spend some time with you reflecting on and identifying some possibilities to improve your own flourishing and well-being. And especially thinking about how it does relate to your work, whether you agree with that or not. And the next would be to think about concrete opportunities in your workplace or your organization or in your life. It doesn't really matter, to start to have conversations more about a positive construct of health and a possibilities mindset, and whether that seems important to you or not, or what that would look like. And finally, if we want to, I have this little iceberg exercise, which would be just thinking about underneath, what are some of the issues that you notice that might not be things that are not going as well as you'd like, either in your work or your organization or the culture, and what are some of the things that are underneath it, and particularly getting to the root of the mindsets, which are really, it's the blind spot, right? That's what's driving everything, you know, in terms of what bubbles up in what we do is the seeds of the mindset. So what do you think? Does that sound good? Okay. All right. So I'm going to go in and out because I'm going to move ahead to some slides rather than, okay. And then I have some. So why don't we start with this, which is really a quick way for you to start having a conversation that's a little bit more applying what we've talked about to your work. So in essence, what I shared was reiterating a lot of what you've probably heard in different contexts, but in a different way. And they all kind of drill down to three core principles for promoting well-being. One is supporting responsive relationships at all levels. The next is strengthening core life skills, like skills for listening, active listening, skills for being able to be present, skills for self-regulation, skills for, persistence, grit. You know, there's all these skills, and they really matter to how we handle or can heal from what's going on ourselves and then with the families. And then the third is reducing those sources of stress, actually looking at how can we functionally support families with the sources of stress, whether that's their own history of ACEs and trauma or food. So we're always working these different places. We can't really do one without the other. And so the questions that I just put up that we could talk about just as a group, you could start talking with each other, either you want to turn to the person next to you, or I like triads where you can talk with three people and just take a minute or two each to chat about this. And you could also reflect for a moment just on a piece of paper, but do you agree with these three principles as being core to families, to helping families and children thrive? And are they already a part of your work? Or if not, how are they relevant? And what knowledge, behaviors, or resources do you use now or might need to foster in order to promote the kind of positive outcomes we're talking about? Does that sound like a reasonable, at least, and you can do whatever you want with that, but that we can have some conversation at the tables. And then if we take a couple minutes each, do you want to get into triads? And then I'll leave this slide up so you can see it. And just have a conversation. Do you agree with this? How is it playing out in your work? What are you doing now? And what do you need? So let's see if we can have a little conversation and get some more going. And then I think I might take it back more to the personal, to you. Yeah. Is that okay?
Could we come back for a second? We're going to go ahead and read those because I know for some people it's like we're too far away to know what we're
so I'll
talking
just
about.
read them. It's maybe one person at least in your group can write them down, and you can change the question slightly, but it's basically the 3 principles are supporting responsive relationships is a critical factor in building resilience across life. Principle 2 is strengthening core life skills to shift the balance point and tip the scale. And there's just the way that we're talking about it. Reducing sources of stress, like toxic stress, but also stresses because of social determinants and so on. So I guess the question is, do you agree with these principles? And does the order matter? That was another little thing, like, do you have to start anywhere? Can you spin the wheel and start anywhere? And are they already a part of your work? And if so, how? And what knowledge, behaviors, resources do you tap into now or think you might need in order to be a force for promoting supportive relationships, strengthening core life skills, and reducing sources of stress? So is that enough? Yeah? Okay, now go back. Woo! Let's take another minute and then we can share a little bit. So let's see if we can bring some of your wonderful thoughts into the room. Or questions or doubts. So.
The worst part, just getting everybody to quiet down
Yeah.
so we can all talk together.
We'll just talk together for a minute and then we're going to go back into talking with each other. But the key question here is, do you agree with this? How does it play out? What do you think you need? Let's see what some people came up with and what was the gist of what was shared in your group. So both sides of the room. What struck you? What would you like to contribute? There we go.
Tina, gonna go? All right, Tina.
Yeah.
Some of our discussion was that these are beginning building blocks. So
Yeah.
these are like a good foundation to add other blocks to. And then also as you expand on those blocks and you try to expand the supportive side of this, that you will sometimes run into the trust issues.
Yeah.
I may trust you in my inner circle.
Yeah.
And then when you try to expand that and we're going to go further out into the community,
Right.
and then how do you help build that bridge of trust?
That's right.
So that's what we were discussing.
Absolutely. As soon as you start dealing with issues in a serious way, you run up against like that we can only move at the speed of trust, right? That was, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, we agree. And we were thinking about the idea of core life skills and like, what are the chances that universally we agree on what the core life skills are? Because I think that like in our country, right, it might be completely different there may be completely different interpretations of what children need in terms of core life skills. So how do we come to agreement around that?
Yeah. Do you mind if I show something about that, since I was hoping it would come up? So I don't know if you are all aware of this. Have you aware of the Sustainable Development Goals? They're sort of global goals for what we need to do to basically create a sustainable world, address poverty, racism, clean water, all those things. And after decades of working on it, we haven't really gotten very far. So there's this global release of what's called the Inner Development Goals, which is basically saying poverty and racism are problems and clean water is a problem and all these things are problems, but that's not our real problem. Our real problem is we are not the people who can solve those problems, even though they're solvable because we can come up with strategies. We're not doing it. And so they named these Inner Development Goals. And I thought if you didn't mind, I could just like show them to you. So this is where sort of a global effort to define what are the skills, and they fall into being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. So maybe as I just go through them really quickly, you could reflect on, your own world or what you think. Since you brought it up. So the first one listed in this is presence, which is really, very related to a lot of core skills. The capacity to be present, having an inner compass, knowing what you care about and having a way to care about something and be conscious about it and stay true to it. Integrity, authenticity, openness, and a learning mindset. Self-awareness, long-term orientation, visioning, critical thinking, complexity awareness, not trying to oversimplify what's complex and being able to hold complexity, perspective taking, sense making, connectedness, humility, empathy and compassion, appreciation, communication skills, co-creation skills, inclusive mindsets, trust, mobilization skills, being able to bring people along, courage, creativity, optimism, and perseverance. So on April 29th, there'll be a release of these inner development goals, which are what is being set forth is we need to develop this in order to address the problems that we have in society. So I don't know what you think about that, but you brought that up. So I wanted to maybe reflect on that. Any comment on core life skills? No. Yeah.
Here it comes.
Who's closer?
Give me a minute.
Who's closer?
I'm fast
Oh, you got bare feet. That's right. You're ready.
So I was just reflecting on this, and you mentioned briefly in your talk about how we failed at partnerships
Yeah.
because we, for whatever reason, we have, like you said, usually because of a strong leader, whatever, but it's not, I mean, I've been in a million partnerships that sort of, you sort of do it and then nothing happens. And then this, I think this connects with that, these inner development skills. What is going on? Why aren't we being successful in all of these, public health and preventive measures that are so important to society? And you said we're not the right people. I don't know how this, listening to all, I got all of those things. Hopefully, not really, but I mean, you think, okay, so we've got those skills. How is developing those skills going to help us be better at successfully implementing the strategies, the community strategies that we need to, to help us reduce poverty, racism, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I think these are all structural problems in our country that we haven't been able to solve with. So anyway, I find this really, really fascinating and really important, but I don't really know how this gets at the problem.
Does anyone have an idea about that? How it gets at the problem?
So kind of thinking about that in terms of, I have to put the microphone in my mouth. I was just thinking about that in terms of like someone else solving the problem maybe isn't the solution. It's individuals solving their own problems from we can help them, teach them the skills so that internally they can resolve their own poverty, their own hunger, but it's a skill set that needs taught from a baseline to build the structure to be able to resolve the problem from the inside, not someone from the outside telling them how to resolve the problem.
Yeah, that certainly is key. Well, here's one of the, I like this slide because it kind of exhibits what often happens in partnerships. So this is a vicious cycle that we study. People study community partnerships and why they fail or don't or succeed. And oftentimes collaboratives really struggle to co-create, to take action, to agree on action, to follow through on it. And it sometimes comes down to what's actually going on in the group. So one person in the group maybe has a powerful emotion. So that's right here. You can see that. Actually, my pointer isn't working on here. Sorry about that. And then that ignites something in another person and neither one talks about it. So they shut down. So then they get defensive, right? And so these dynamics that go on in groups is when they don't have those skills often keeps clarity from even figuring out what is the problem, what are the options, thinking rationally about what could happen, staying connected. So if you unpack what the skills are to do good community partnerships and organizational change, and you read about organizational change, those skills are there. Does that help at all? How many of you are familiar with something called Theory U? This is not a pretty slide, and you don't even need to look at it because it's hard to read anyway, but there's something called Theory U, which is a model of how we create change, transformational change, and it's being used, it's from MIT. And I actually facilitate this process. And it's really recognizing that when people come together who are trying to work together on behalf of a change in a community or an organization, all come from different places. And they first have to come together to uncover their common intent. which means we usually have to stop and listen. And so those listening skills and being able to take perspective and be present and, know ourselves well enough to be able to share what our perspective is, and a lot of the different skills there. And usually you have to navigate these voices of judgment and voices of criticism and voices of fear to be able to then start to come together and really look at possibilities and really open up an exploration where you can then come to a place of connection with each other. And then as soon as that's achieved, using all those skills, a lot of them come into play, you can usually take action quickly because you're on a solid base. And without creating that solid base, often things just disband because there's not a solid base to move from. So co-creating is really a function of, in a group, is the function of the ability of that group to really function well together. So I'm interested if do you have any more thoughts about how those skills relate to our ability to work together in communities or organizations to create change? Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to you, but I don't know if you can see me. Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah.
Does that mean you didn't have anything else you wanted to add?
Or anyone. Yeah. Yeah, you don't need to, if you have anything, you want to add something? Yeah.
I hate to ask this question, be the one guy in the room, but what if you get past step 3? What if you've got one team member that's kind of cancerous, or it's the bad apple? How do you collectively pluck that thing and chuck it?
Yeah, I mean, this is where you get into really good communication skills. That was another thing in the inner development goals, where you have to make space for having difficult conversations and setting, agreements as a group. And at some point, if those agreements aren't kept, about how we're going to be together. So intentionality about how we're going to go about addressing what we're addressing is one of the first steps. How do we want to be together? We're coming together to listen to each other, to learn, to come to agreements in a way that abides by these things. And if we can't, often it's because we're triggered in our own trauma and we want to have a place of care and support for that. So if you find that that's happening, then anyone can call a break and we can take a few breaths and, have empathy for each other, but really bringing the humanity fully into it, because that's exactly what happens, especially around dealing with trauma. A lot of people who are coming together to deal with trauma have experienced trauma and have a lot of their own healing, and we all do. And so that's really what I'm saying, is that to make things work in a community partnership or organizational partnership, these factors, these skills are really critical. And then also at the family level, what you said, creating core skills, a lot of those core skills are really critical also to change our own lives, right? Yeah. So that's difficult, but critical, the critical conversations, difficult conversations. And then if not, then the group has to make it. But if you don't make those agreements up front and then something happens after, it can be difficult to go back. And so being intentional about how do we want to actually work together and making agreements about that, and then using exercises to keep people reflective. Yeah. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to share what I first thought of when I wrote these 3 skills down: the responsive relationship, strengthening life skills, and reducing sources of stress. These are basically the 3 components of a parents as teachers home visit. We have to hit all 3 components in order for it to count as a parents as teachers home visit.
Yeah.
We call them by different names: responsive relationship, encouraging parent-child interaction, and also the interaction between the parent and the home visitor. We want to have that be an open relationship. So there's lots of relationship-based work going on there. The strengthening critical life skills falls into what we call development-centered parenting, where we're looking at the development of the child and the development of the parent, and talking about what are your responsibilities now as far as getting this child to a doctor, teaching them to dress themselves, teaching them. So critical life skills to me sounds a little different than what it started out, but reducing sources of stress is which is family well-being. With you, change that. But our group in talking, and we're all parents, teachers, home visitors, is that person time and you can focus on them in any different order. Tell someone now is not the best time to get a puppy. But, they have to
No, I think that's really the key, that, when we're working, we have to keep people engaged and meet them there. And that's really the part. Anyone have some tips on that part about how we can hold the complexity? We were talking about group processes. And that's where I told you about the inner development goals, because those are really aligned with how do we solve problems in communities and in society. But that engagement where somebody picks it for themselves, letting part of the welcome planner, and then you are meeting, and then meeting that priority pulls the thread that may lead to the trust that's needed to then make a different change that maybe you were going to suggest. But if they're not in it, it's just going to be like a lockdown of, oh, here's somebody telling me. It's really about letting somebody lead their own evolution and respecting it. Maybe a small step, but you need a bigger step. And so how do we meet people where they are, even if it's not that's helpful, but that's really the family agenda leading. Then you come in and you have the data and you say, okay, we've got a lot of information. Do you think we have? Do you have a concern? Here's some information. Do we have a concern? Constantly ask. What do you think of the? What are some good things? Bad things, like constantly being in relationship and letting the person guide. And only after you say, would you like me to share with you my opinion? I think these are some of the deep skills that are needed. Staying engaged, where somebody's leading their own process.
Start some tabletop.
Yeah, we could do two things. One is we could look at your systems and organizations and talk about this iceberg model. Or what I'd also like to do is go back to the flourishing exercise and maybe have it be a little more personal, where you reflect on your own, what you said, and what you might like to, promote your own flourishing, maintain it, and how it relates to your work. Like really start to think, well, how does this relate? Like your ability to be in that kind of conversation with somebody and learn those skills even might have something to do with your own. So why don't we do that first, unless we got a big vote. I had a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't know which area you wanted to go to, but this is the reflection. Before we do this, if you don't mind, we can talk about, but I'm going to do a little exercise with you for just a moment, finding a tool. A lot of what I've been saying is that underneath what's hard is usually a longing for something good. And so even when we suffer, even when there's pain, even when there's frustration, if you really wind it down, it's because something's happening that's threatening something that is good and true and right to want. And how awareness of that can totally change our bodies, our brains, and and the ideas that we come up with. So if you would do this with me just for a minute, and then we can ask these questions, and I'll read the questions at the end. Okay, so you can keep your eyes open, keep your eyes closed or whatever, and make some notes if you want. But the first part is really just to reflect on something that is actually a source of now concern. You notice you're thinking about. Did you want to so just thinking about something that's difficult for you, and let yourself just be aware of that and notice what it feels like in your body, in your mind, what are your thoughts? Body, thoughts growing and starting to one of the things that is something that's really stressful is usually it has a pretty big impact on our biology. If you had some hookup, you would see your heart rate change. You would see, you know, your blood pressure change. You would see thoughts can start to really self-doubt can grow fast. It's happening, anger, hopelessness. Like how hard we can actually have a lot go on. So just notice that and then take a second to bring that into a place of awareness. What is it that I really long for and want that makes this difficult? What is the positive thing that I would like to see that is making this a problem? I want peace. I want to have positive relationships. I want to help this family. What is the longing? It's really a good, positive longing that is giving rise to the problem. About what it feels like to long for that and how what it says about you, what it says that you are holding a lot of positive aspiration for yourself, for others, for society. That when that's not happening, if it's something personal even, I'm upset at somebody who won't talk to me, it's because you want connection. You care. You want to be connected. So it's always, there's something positive. What would happen if we brought that into the mix? What I really long for is just feel into that and then maybe go back to the problem or the issue and see if anything new arises for you. New way of experiencing it. Appreciate yourself more, have new ideas, guys, or a way you might really good and true and right to care about. And that really underneath it that is threatened. And so what is that? And how can we be aware of that? Because we don't get angry unless there's something we care about usually. So what is that thing? And if that thing isn't something that's good to care about, because it might be I care about being the only one who has things. That's also good to know about. But usually when people reflect on what really upsets them, it's because of something that they really aspire to. And so underneath what's difficult is also this aspiration. So that's just a little exercise, and I didn't do it all the way, called Finding the Jewel. But when we're upset, to do that can actually help to bring up a lot of ideas and peace, and also help disconnect us from our own self-judgment, which is often at play. Any comments on your experience there? Anyone have an interesting experience to share? many things. We have such short time. So I would like you to reflect, if you can, on that exercise on flourishing. So if you remember, it was about 1/3, about, I don't know, like 5% or 2% of the group was 0 to 1, but about 1/3, 2 to 3, about 1/3, 4 to 5, and about 1/3, all 6. So there's a lot of variation. And it could work to just do one-on-one, like 2 people at a time, or 3 at the most in your group. Just turn to some other people and just reflect on what was it like for you to reflect on your own flourishing. Was it uncomfortable? And how do you feel now? So just a little bit about what was that like? Have you done that before? What was it like to do that? And start to think about ways you already support your flourishing, like if it was on the higher end or the certain areas, what are you actually already doing? And what might you begin to do to support your own flourishing? And then if you get that far, to talk about how that might impact your work. So I just threw up some questions. You don't have to abide by them, but I was just trying to get a conversation going. So maybe you could just take a minute to reflect on what was it like to reflect on your flourishing, if you're willing to share. What are you doing now that's either intentional or not, that you could make intentional to keep yourself in a space of feeling like you have a sense of meaning and purpose. You're engaged in life, pursuing and trying to cultivate positive, connected, safe relationships for yourself. Noticing the positive, allowing yourself to notice and have gratitude and positivity in your life, and making that important so that you have the nourishment of that. There's always something. And looking at whether you feel you contribute, value yourself for that, and then having a sense of mattering just for who you are. Those qualities of mattering. Do you feel people are aware of your presence? Do you feel people care about you? Do you feel you're valued? What you a little bit, because it's very interesting how people work. So maybe you could pick a couple of people, or one person or 2 people in your group. Reflect on what does it feel like? What are you doing now? What might you do, and how might that impact your work? Second step. Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Okay, maybe we can share a little bit about what we do already or what we could do to improve our flourishing and how that impacts our work. Hey, Roger, do you want to be Mr. Donahue again? Okay. I know it can be tedious to self-reflect and all this stuff, and we don't know each other that well, but let's trying to create an opportunity to connect with others and think about ourselves. So what came up? These were the 6 qualities of flourishing. I had a really interesting conversation with somebody. I'm wondering if anybody else did, about what was it like to reflect on your flourishing? Was it meaningful? Was it valuable? What are you doing already? And what might you start doing, and how does it impact your work? Any of that? Okay. Who would like to share something that came up for you? Or
Save Kimber and I, because otherwise we
yeah.
have to stand here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything, because this is kind of personal, but
yeah.
sense of mattering is a big one for me. 4 months into my marriage 17 years ago, I knew it wasn't going to be good, but I kept trying, and I never felt like I mattered in that relationship. So a year ago, my divorce was finalized, and I have set boundaries for myself. I will not be around people who don't appreciate me, who don't want to be around me, who don't respect me and love me. And that sense of mattering, I had no idea how much that was going to change my life, to be around people who really liked to be around me, who didn't ignore me or forget that I was there because they were too busy playing video games. And because I have made that effort, my perspective of me has completely changed.
Right. And of course that's, yeah, of course that's one of the biggest consequences of trauma or toxic stress or ACEs is a sense of focusing on others so much that you don't realize you even have needs or preferences, or that you could actually set boundaries and have some choice. It's deactivated. And so that's why it's so important that if you have that more, do you feel like you're in a better position to help those that you serve?
Absolutely. Yeah. And to know what it feels like to not can help me in reaching out to those people who are in the same situation, help them understand that they do matter. And yeah, it's made a huge difference.
Like was said over here in this table, that there is somebody there's somebody out there that does care about you, and that you can go find that, and to not, but it's, yeah. So it's, I know this is an intimate conversation, but this is kind of what we're talking about, is how much we literally individually matter every moment in our services we're doing and in our work groups and things like that. And when we don't tend to it, how it doesn't go as well. Yeah.
This is a sort of a different.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's helped me in my flourishing, besides getting a divorce like she did, that was helpful. But I think that called the Tao of all high importance to things, and you take them very personally, and it talks about how you have to sort of have some level of so that if I'm not successful at reaching this person in my life, that I have to sort of pull back a little bit and and just be a little, I'm like I'm not gonna attach myself too strongly to that, because it's going to affect my own personal well-being if I doesn't go right. So I have to pull back a little bit and detach myself from it. And I found that this is probably 20 years ago I read that, and I found that's really been helpful for me in terms of keeping my own sense of well-being and health, in that I'm doing as much as I can do. Clearly about like what's going on, not that you're
detaching from the outcome, but staying sincere in your effort.
I'm articulating it as well as I'd like to.
Well, I
but-
think it really speaks, I don't know if it's true, but going from fixing to connecting, so that you show up, you give your best, but if it doesn't work, you're not going to go into a, tailspin, but you're still showing up. So it's not deciding to not care, because that's actually a straight road to burnout, is to decide you don't care. Not people swing into undercare when they can't fix it. So the studies, this is a series of studies on heart disease, actually, on burnout as well, of professionals, looking at what contributes to burnout is this sense of overcare. I have to fix it. And then as soon as you can't fix it, you get burnout and undercare and attachment. Instead of just care, I'm going to stay in a space of care. I'm going to show up with what I have, hold and contain the fact that I can't control this, but I'm not going to shut down. And so, but often that's what happens is we go into overcare and then we swing between the two, because then we feel bad about detaching and not caring and not giving our best. So then we try to fix again. And this swing is very common versus that place of just really honestly being present with what is and showing up in that home visiting process, saying, really doing the work of engaging somebody and knowing that you can't control them, but you can be there in that way. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We can't really actually fix people usually. We can only offer. So what else was it like to reflect on your own flourishing? Does it matter to your work? Does it matter to your life? What can you do?
This is I recognized how challenging it was to take this concept and try to come up with an answer that was kind of for the question you were asking. Instead, I started thinking about flourishing in the sense of the programs I'm involved in,
Right.
and how it's been a very difficult space, because what I want to see happen is so big. What flourishing looks like for what I want to do is just this very large scale thing. And it's not, very feasible in the next probably year, or I would hope maybe in the 5-year time frame. But
Right.
then in the conversation that we were having here, I felt this kind of redirect, but to like, how are you flourishing? And I think we might sometimes be in spaces more often where we think about what we're trying to do flourish and how we can make our programs flourish,
Right.
how we can accomplish things,
Right.
that we don't take it and personalize it like you were asking us to do, and
Right.
have that intention to answer that question so we can be well. So now I'm
That's
like,
right.
crud, there's some
And
stuff
if
I gotta do.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I don't know your name. What's your name? Yeah. Jan, like Jan said that when that flipped for her, how much it really did impact her ability to then promote flourishing for others, and how that works that way. And so this is really, I know I'm in a difficult position. You probably all be happy when I run away, but it is important that we really take that self-reflection piece and self-care and our own flourishing, and how it really dictates whether we're going to be able to promote it in other people. There's a saying, and I remember listening to it, you can't love anyone else till you love yourself. And I used to thought, oh, that's an interesting saying, until I actually realized, oh my gosh, it's literally true. And that we feel one another. And when we're not in a place of that, it doesn't work as well for our services. Yeah.
This reflection was interesting for me. It reminds me of a poem that you shared earlier in your last presentation. And the second line of that poem was, that means you honor what is first before you try to change it.
Right.
So the reflection enabled me, I guess, to go deep within, to find that darkness, and then kind of flip it to see, well, why is that bothering me, and what can I do to change it? And I think the same applies when we utilize what we do. We help those around us.
Yeah.
We've got to meet with them where they are at.
That's right.
And not where we want them to be,
Yeah.
because they're generally not.
And when
ever
you're
the same.
there with somebody, you're there with them. That is the positive. If you're with somebody in pain, you're actually creating a positive, because you're present with what is, with your care. And so I just put this poem up because it was the next slide, but these slides aren't in any order, but I do want to make sure that you know that your well-being physically, your heart rate variability, your own physical well-being is enhanced by this place of care, which is that place you hold that you just described, that the poem talked about. And as soon as you go into overcare or undercare and shut down, your own body, your own nervous system, your own neurobiology starts to be dysregulated. And so how important it is to cultivate that capacity to be with, and then also keeping our creativity online, and how connected that is to your own sense of flourishing and what we can be, take responsibility, like accountability for our own well-being. It's not going to just happen. Even if you saved everybody around you magically, it wouldn't necessarily do it, right? Like the Tao of poo, that's not going to do it. Nothing's going to do it but being connected and present, because that's where life happens moment by moment. I know it starts. I had a whole mindfulness exercise, but we're really kind of almost out of time, but I want to see if there's anybody else that wants to share, because this is really good. And thank you for going here. Yeah.
So when I was a young kid, 16, 17 years old, I had one of my good friends passed away in a car wreck, and had a hard time with this. And at the same time, my father kind of was thinking that this was such a terrible thing, and he's afraid of me going down this path. So he tried to basically control my life by saying, these are the things you have to do.
Right.
And as a child, I just felt like his thumb was on top of me all the time. So I ended up rebelling a lot, and basically we did not get along for a long period of time. Now in that, over the next period of a year, like he tried to get me into counseling and other things, trying to fix me. And of course that just drove us further and further apart. Right. Well, finally he went and took a class. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Tough Love.
Yeah.
Right. So for him, it was, here he is freaking out about his son, trying to figure out a way of taking care and making sure his son right. But because of that, forcing me further and further away. The moment he took that class and realized that it wasn't him to fix me, that it had were my actions. That's what I was responsible for, and not him. But he was there for me all the time. And one of the best things he did for me as a teenager is he said, look, these are the rules of the house. And if you don't want to follow them, that's your choice. But the door's going to be locked at 11. And at 11 o'clock, if you're not home, you'll have to find somewhere else to sleep. And having that freedom, it lasted probably, I would say 6-8 months after that. And I was like, well, this is silly. I'll just be home at 11.
Yeah.
Right. So having those choices on my own, and him not feeling responsible, and me not feeling like someone's trying to force me to change my life, gave me the opportunity to realize that I could change my own life.
And you chose yourself.
And I chose myself.
Yeah. And that's really the line we walk with everybody, every child, every family, is how do we stay? But he was there for you. Yeah. To talk about your feelings if something was hard, and those positive childhood experiences that we studied. And actually, I don't know if Jennifer's here anymore, got published in JAMA, which is not easy to do. It was like a near-death experience. I had to write review responses back that were longer than the paper itself to help the reviewers understand that a positive experience is not the opposite of a negative experience. That there's lots of negative experiences, and then there's positive experiences, and they go at the same time, and we can promote the positive now every moment. And in doing that, we then gain agency to take it. And that if we don't pay attention to that, we just focus on the illness and and also what you said. I think there's a lot of analogies you shared. So these kinds of processes really are important to take on. And I know they're self-reflective, and I really appreciate you indulging it. But if anyone wants to keep talking, I'm available. Yes, please. Okay. Please, and we're not in a hurry. Go ahead.
A couple of the things that came to mind when I first started looking at that is that the definition of flourishing that you had, and those 6 items, nowhere in there did it say you earn a certain amount of money,
right,
or you achieved a certain education rank or a certain title. Like there's some external things that maybe the world thinks of as success or flourishment, and that not necessarily lead to peace and satisfaction and happiness in the long term, or in a family or an individual setting. And then the other thought that we talked about as a group was that kind of the other side of this flourishing is a state of survival. How many times we're not quite there to, am I flourishing? I'm just surviving.
surviving. I'm just making it right there. And so on an individual level, but then also in whatever programs or whatever place we're coming from today is like, we have to meet our people where they're at.
That's right.
And if you're surviving, I'm going to help you survive until I can get you to a place where I'm going to help you flourish.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to be there first. Okay, I can move to flourishing now so that I can lead you to flourish.
Right. And just asking the question, like we ask a lot of questions about what's wrong. What if we started asking about what might be going right? And what would that bring up is, you know, opportunities. So if you're asking people about a sense of meaning and it's not there, a quick conversation probably would generate 5 things that they could do to have a sense of meaning. It could be a plant. It could be making my bed every day. It could be so many small things. And that really will start to build capacity to then address what's hard. Thank you for sharing that. And there's studies on that, like, right? Lots of rich, famous people who have everything and who are miserable, right? So I know I had a meaningful conversation with the person I talked to, and this is just a little tiny dip in the river. I have a lot more slides I was going to go into on the your being, their well-being component. And you know, if anybody wants to talk more, I'll just go ahead and send them, okay, with all the other question prompts that we didn't get to because we just wanted to be organic. And I'll be here for the rest of the day if anyone wants to talk more. I wish we had more time, but I have to say, wow, this was a nice and really beautiful experience for me. Thank you for entertaining me here today and listening to me and offering yourselves.
Well, I'm only standing between you and lunch, so I'm gonna just say something quickly. That was an amazing morning. I hope it was for you too. I mean, there's so much that we learned and picked up, and you know, and we'll send out the slides so you can spend more time with it all. And we'll try to keep Christina in our world here, you know, so we can keep bringing her thinking back into our, you know, into our efforts. It's really a good opportunity, I think, both to look inside and outside, and hopefully it all brought, you know, again, a new big idea to you about some things you might be doing differently in the work that you do every day. And again, thank you for the work that you do every day, because that's the thing that really makes a difference. It's really the thing that, you know, that is going to change the world, and really appreciate that. So here's the plan. Lunch is out here, this way rather than that way, this way. And so it's a buffet. So go get food, you know, come back in. We don't have an agenda for lunch, so hang out, talk to each other. And then workshops will start at 1:15, and they're in your program. And so hopefully go to the one that you chose, and, you know, hopefully they're not too crowded. We're a lot of people. I was thinking about, because I'm older, I was thinking about Woodstock. And I remember that at Woodstock, they said, okay, now we have to all just take care of each other because there's so many more of us than we planned for. So anyway, there are a lot more than we normally have, and appreciate your tolerance with that too. So, and let us know if you have any issues, any problems, come to us, you know, let us know. Enjoy lunch. Oh, we have directions for lunch. Hold on.
We do have the buffet out both doors, and those with food restrictions, there is a special table right out this door. So if you have food limitations, check out that one. Otherwise, the buffet is out both sides.